The ex-husband arrives at a party with his mistress. He thought his past was behind him, until he suddenly locks eyes with his stunning ex-wife. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Paul Winters stood by the tall window in his modern Chicago apartment, studying his reflection. At 38, he was proud of how he had turned his life around after the turbulence of his divorce. Yet, despite his height and confident posture, something in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. He tightened the knot of his tie for the 5th time that evening. Each small, repetitive gesture betrayed a hint of restlessness he could never quite shake. He had been looking forward to this moment for weeks, the night of the annual marketing gala hosted by his company, Hawthorne and Pierce. It was supposed to be a celebration of his career resurgence. Paul was well liked at the firm, having proven himself capable of leading key campaigns to success. The event promised the perfect opportunity to introduce his current girlfriend, Vanessa Sterling, to colleagues and higher-ups. His reflection told him he was ready, or at least he wanted to believe so. A gentle buzz signaled a text on his phone. Vanessa's message appeared, "On my way, you're going to love what I'm wearing tonight." Paul allowed a slight grin to surface. Vanessa, 32, was elegant, driven, and head over heels in love with him. She had been a pillar of support through the rougher days of his divorce. Always patient, always encouraging. He was grateful to have someone who made him feel desirable again, even when self-doubt lingered. He glanced around his spacious living room, filled with muted grays and navy accents that matched his conservative taste. A single framed photo stood on the corner table. It was from years ago, when he was still married to Margot. In it, he wore a bright, carefree smile, and Margot's blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders as she laughed beside him. He hesitated, then turned the frame face down. He couldn't bring himself to throw it away, no matter how much he told himself he was over that chapter of his life. His phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from his older brother, David, who lived on the West Coast. "Heard Margot got hired at your firm. You good?" Paul inhaled sharply. He had spotted an internal memo circulating days earlier about a new creative lead appointment, but the name hadn't been revealed in that email. He had dismissed the rumor that it could be Margot, but David's text hinted otherwise. Paul tried to set aside the nagging worry, telling himself that she was unlikely to appear at tonight's event. After all, he hadn't seen her in over a year, and they'd barely stayed in touch. The buzzer at his door rang. Opening it, he saw Vanessa, perfectly composed, in a black-fitted dress that accentuated her poised figure. Her dark hair was swept back in a sleek style, and she smiled widely as she stepped in, leaning up to kiss him on the cheek. She had an air of sophistication that reminded him of how she could navigate any room with grace. Tonight would be no exception. "You look lovely," he told her, guiding her inside. "Thank you," she replied, straightening his jacket lapels. "You seem a bit tense. Gala jitters." He tried to brush off her concern. "Just anxious to get there. Andrew Caldwell, the new CEO, is announcing some reshuffling in the marketing department. You know how much I've been hoping for a bigger role." Vanessa gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You deserve it, Paul. Let's go show them you're the best they've got." They made their way downstairs and into a waiting rideshare. The city lights of Chicago glimmered past as they rode toward the luxury hotel hosting the gala. Vanessa filled the car ride with amusing anecdotes from her own day. A client who couldn't decide on a new accounting system, a co-worker who had confused presentation dates. Paul listened politely, but his mind remained partially occupied. He reminded himself that tonight was supposed to be about celebrating how far he'd come since the divorce. He had a fresh start, a flourishing relationship, and a shot at a long-coveted promotion. There was no reason to feel uneasy. By the time they arrived at the hotel, an excited crowd buzzed around the grand lobby. Chandeliers cast warm light over polished floors, and well-dressed professionals mingled over drinks. Paul placed his hand gently on Vanessa's back as they made their way toward the ballroom, greeting people he recognized from the marketing team. A few turned to admire Vanessa, who radiated an air of confidence befitting the event's glamour. Yet, as he stepped into the ballroom, Paul couldn't shake a faint tremor beneath his composure. He smiled, nodded, and shook hands with colleagues. He introduced Vanessa to a few team members who raved about her elegance. There was a sense of pride in seeing how easily she navigated these interactions. Still, the gnawing feeling that something or someone might disrupt his perfect evening stayed with him. He reminded himself that he had a fresh chapter to write tonight, one free from the mistakes of his past. This was his new beginning. He only hoped it would remain that way. Paul and Vanessa made their way deeper into the ballroom, where the band played a mellow jazz tune. The scent of expensive perfume and cologne mingled with the aroma of hors d'oeuvres, creating an ambiance of celebration. Several large banners displaying Hawthorne and Pierce's latest marketing achievements lined the walls, each emblazoned with the firm's signature logo. It was a scene that usually infused Paul with a sense of professional pride. He guided Vanessa toward a cluster of co-workers gathered near the stage. She recognized a few faces from smaller office gatherings and greeted them with a warm, genuine smile. Paul exchanged polite chit-chat about recent campaigns, carefully steering the conversation toward the positive developments he hoped would lead him to a promotion. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a momentary glimpse of a woman with blonde hair speaking to Andrew Caldwell, the newly appointed CEO. Andrew, a tall man in his mid-40s, had a charismatic aura that matched his reputation as a dynamic leader who had shaken up the industry with bold moves. The woman at his side wore a stunning sapphire blue dress. Paul felt his chest tighten unexpectedly, the air stolen from his lungs. He recognized that dress, or more precisely, he recognized her, Margot, his ex-wife. For an instant, the lively chatter of the ballroom faded into a dull hum, and he stood motionless. She appeared more radiant than he remembered, her blonde waves cascading onto her shoulders, her posture confident yet composed. Even at a distance, he could sense a new energy about her, something refined and different from the woman he once knew. Vanessa touched his arm gently. "Paul, are you okay?" Her eyes narrowed in concern, following his gaze. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to respond. "I'm fine." "Thought I saw, someone I knew." She looked in the same direction, but Margot had already stepped around the corner, obscured by a small crowd near the stage. Vanessa didn't seem to spot her. "Should we go say hi to Andrew Caldwell?" she offered, noticing the CEO was now alone, scanning the room with a welcoming smile. Paul hesitated, torn between wanting to maintain a confident front and the uneasiness clenching his stomach. "I think we should," he managed. "I've been meaning to talk to him about the new campaign direction." He led Vanessa through the throng, exchanging pleasantries with people as they maneuvered closer to the stage. The moment they reached Andrew, he extended his hand, greeting Paul by name. Caldwell's handshake was firm, his grin wide. "Paul Winters," the CEO said, scanning Paul's face. "I've heard a lot about your work on our client accounts. Good to finally put a face to the name." Paul nodded. "Likewise, Mr. Caldwell. This is Vanessa Sterling." Vanessa offered a polite greeting, and Caldwell responded with a courteous bow of his head. "Welcome, Vanessa. Hope you're enjoying the evening." Before Paul could delve into discussing marketing strategies, he caught a glimpse of movement just behind Caldwell. Emerging once again into view was Margot. This time, she locked eyes with Paul. a brief flicker of recognition crossing her expression. Her lips parted slightly in surprise, then eased into a measured smile. The chill that ran through Paul's body was undeniable. He heard his own heartbeat pulse in his ears. Margot stepped forward, looking from Paul to Vanessa and finally settling her gaze on Caldwell. "Andrew," she began in a calm, even tone, "is this one of the colleagues you wanted me to meet?" "Yes," Caldwell said enthusiastically. "This is Paul Winters. You'll be collaborating with him on the major rebranding campaign." Then he gestured toward Margot with unmistakable pride. "Paul, meet Margot Price, our new creative director." Paul's breath caught. He nodded stiffly, trying to maintain composure. "Margot," he managed, voice subdued. She held his gaze for a long moment, as though measuring how to greet him. "Paul." Her eyes flicked briefly to Vanessa. "It's nice to meet you all." Vanessa, picking up on the tension, extended her hand politely. "Vanessa Sterling, so you're joining the creative team." Margot accepted the handshake. "Yes, I'm excited to bring fresh ideas to the department," she said, glancing back at Paul, "though I suspect we'll have some familiar faces." Andrew Caldwell broke the silence, unaware of the history between Paul and Margot. "I can't wait to see what you two come up with," he said, clearly pleased by what he assumed was a standard professional introduction. Paul forced a smile, hoping it looked genuine. "We'll do our best, sir." As the CEO excused himself to greet another board member, Vanessa offered Margot a polite word about how impressed she was by the company's decision to hire fresh talent. Margot responded cordially, but the tension between her and Paul was unmistakable, like a subtle current of electricity. Paul noticed how composed she seemed, a sharp contrast to the swirl of emotions surging through him. He felt rooted to the spot, all his previous confidence evaporating under the weight of unspoken memories. The dull hum of the crowd returned to his ears, reminding him he was in a crowded ballroom with his girlfriend, introduced for the first time to his ex-wife. Paul navigated the ballroom in an almost mechanical fashion, exchanging quick greetings and small talk while trying to avoid Margot's line of sight. His mind spun with questions he never thought he'd have to answer again. Why had she taken a job at his company? How did she look so composed, so untouched by their past? Vanessa, meanwhile, recognized the strain on Paul's features. She had never witnessed him so tense in social settings. He usually excelled at schmoozing with colleagues, but tonight he seemed distracted. She sensed a wall between them, yet she wasn't sure what stood on the other side. "Paul," she said quietly, tugging at his sleeve, "let's step outside for some air. You seem uneasy." He hesitated, then gave a curt nod. They slipped through the side door leading to a quieter corridor. The music and chatter from the ballroom grew distant, replaced by the soft hum of overhead lights. Vanessa looked up at him, concern furrowing her brow. "Is there something you want to tell me?" He took a breath, contemplating how much he could reveal. He had never hidden his divorce from her, but he rarely spoke of Margot in detail. "I'm sorry. It's just I didn't expect Margot to be here." She tilted her head, recalling the name. "Your ex-wife." He nodded. "I had no idea she was the new creative director. The memo didn't include a name. It's..." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "It's a shock seeing her again." Vanessa's expression softened. "I understand it might be unsettling, but she's part of the company now, so maybe you two need to clear the air. Especially if you'll be collaborating on projects." Paul tried to steady himself. "Yeah, maybe, but not tonight. Tonight's supposed to be about celebrating our success, and I don't want to drag the past into it." Vanessa searched his face, then placed a hand over his. "All right, let's go back in, make our rounds, and keep this evening as smooth as possible." He mustered a faint smile. grateful she wasn't pressing further. It was one of the many things he appreciated about Vanessa, her capacity to show grace in difficult situations. They returned to the buzzing ballroom. Paul located a group of colleagues from the marketing department and joined in their conversation. Pushing the encounter with Margot to the back of his mind, at least he tried to. The laughter and the swirl of champagne glasses around him felt somewhat unreal, as if he were watching a scene through a filter. He focused on the mundane, the new advertising concept for a retail client, the latest updates from their digital campaigns, a funny anecdote about a co-worker's mishap with the office printer. Yet every time he glanced around, he half expected to see Margot. He felt relieved that she seemed occupied with other top executives. At one point, he caught a glimpse of her silhouette near the bar, engaged in lively conversation. Her posture was confident, her smile bright, and it reminded him of those early days when they had first moved to Chicago. She would light up any room simply by stepping in. He struggled not to dwell on memories. The night he proposed to her on the banks of Lake Michigan. The arguments that escalated as his career demands grew. The day she finally packed her things and left. He recalled the avalanche of regrets he felt afterward, how he wished he had found balance before it was too late. One of his colleagues asked him a direct question about the next quarter's sales projections, snapping him back to the present. Paul cleared his throat and offered a concise, informed response, though he could feel his nerves tensing every few seconds. Vanessa attempted to shield him from prying remarks by steering conversations away from personal matters. She sensed the potential for someone to bring up Margot's name or mention the fresh gossip of Paul's ex-wife joining the firm. For the most part, people were polite enough to avoid the subject publicly, but the rumor mill was already spinning among smaller circles. Hours dragged by. Paul successfully dodged direct encounters with Margot, occupying himself with colleagues. Eventually, the awarding ceremony approached, a moment where exemplary teams and individuals were recognized for outstanding achievements over the past year. He and Vanessa joined the throng near the stage. Several applause breaks later, Andrew Caldwell stepped up to the microphone for the final address. While Caldwell spoke, Paul surveyed the crowd again. Margot stood off to the side, near a large banner. She seemed engaged with a few senior managers, including Sarah Collins from PR. Paul's chest tightened at the sight of them laughing together, remembering how easily Margot had once connected with nearly everyone she met. He made a conscious decision to leave the event as soon as the final address ended. He couldn't handle the constant awareness that Margot was only a few steps away. Once Caldwell wrapped up his speech, everyone clapped, and Paul turned to Vanessa. "How about we call it a night?" he whispered. She nodded. "Sure, let's go." He felt a fleeting sense of relief as they walked toward the exit, weaving through people who lingered to chat. He kept his head down, avoiding further eye contact with Margot. The idea of confronting her was too daunting at the moment, and he wanted to escape before any forced interaction. He knew, though, that avoiding Margot this evening wouldn't erase the fact that she was now a part of his professional world again. A few days after the gala, Paul sat at his desk at Hawthorne and Pierce, tapping his pen against a notepad filled with bullet points for a client pitch. Outside his office window, traffic crawled through downtown Chicago, horns blaring, the city as restless as his thoughts. A discreet knock at the door signaled Nathan Green's arrival. Nathan, 39-ish, had been Paul's close friend since their early days at the firm. He strolled in, eyebrows raised. "Mind if I come in?" Nathan asked, not waiting for an answer before he dropped into the chair opposite Paul. "I've got a sense you're not exactly your usual self this week." Paul sighed, leaning back. "News travels fast, I see. You saw Margot at the gala, right?" Nathan lowered his voice. I mean, word got around that Hawthorne and Pierce's new star in creative is your ex-wife. Paul clenched his pen. I'm trying not to make a big deal out of it, but it's complicated. She has the role I've been eyeing for ages, Nathan. I've spent years building my track record, hoping to lead a major creative initiative. Now she swoops in from who knows where, and I'm expected to act like it's normal. Nathan tilted his head, absorbing the frustration. You know how it is here. The board tends to bring in external talent for top creative positions, but this is Margot. Have you talked to her since the gala? Paul shook his head. Not directly, just polite nods in group meetings, and I'm not sure I'm ready for a heart-to-heart. She looks fine, like she's got everything together. Nathan shrugged, a cautious sympathy in his eyes. People put on masks. You more than anyone should know appearances can be deceiving. Maybe she's as unsettled as you are. Nathan's words hung in the air. Paul tapped his pen again, unsure how to respond. He'd spent the weekend replaying every moment of their brief, awkward encounter, convinced Margot was radiating the confidence he once admired. But was it possible she, too, felt a swirl of conflicted emotions? Across the hallway, Paul noticed movement. A group was gathering in the conference room for a scheduled creative meeting. He spotted Margot in a tailored navy blazer, speaking animatedly with Andrew Caldwell and Sarah Collins. Andrew gestured for everyone to take their seats. Paul cleared his throat. Let's talk later. I've got a meeting to attend. Nathan nodded, rising from the chair. Hang in there, and hey, if you need someone to vent to, you know where to find me. Moments later, Paul joined the meeting, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. Margot was presenting her vision for the upcoming rebranding project, her voice steady as she clicked through slides. We want a campaign that resonates with our clients' core values, she explained. That means tapping into authentic storytelling, something that truly speaks to the consumer's heart. Paul listened, arms crossed, vaguely annoyed at how persuasive she sounded. Still, he had to admit she was good. This was exactly the sort of pitch that could elevate Hawthorne and Pierce's image. Andrew Caldwell, seated at the head of the table, turned toward Paul. We'd like the marketing team to align seamlessly with these creative concepts. Paul, since you're one of our lead executives, I'm counting on you to collaborate closely with Margot. Paul forced a professional smile. Of course. I'll make sure our team supports these initiatives. Margot's gaze flickered toward him. For an instant, he felt the unspoken tension, a reminder of the emotional baggage between them. Yet, in front of the entire team, they both presented themselves as calm, efficient professionals. After the meeting ended, most attendees dispersed, leaving Paul packing up his notes alongside Margot. She offered a quiet greeting, her eyes carefully neutral. That was a good discussion, she said softly. He nodded, avoiding her gaze. Yes, your approach is solid. The direction you're taking on authenticity is something we've needed. A faint smile curved on her lips. I appreciate that. She hesitated. I know we have unresolved things, but for the sake of the team, maybe we should sit down sometime, talk about how we can collaborate effectively. Paul's heart pounded. He wanted to bury the past and move on, yet the call for professionalism forced him to consider a conversation he wasn't sure he could handle calmly. We should, yes, he said, stuffing papers into his briefcase. I'll let you know when I have time in my schedule. Margot nodded, stepping out of the room. Paul watched her go, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. He knew he couldn't keep dodging her forever. Sooner or later, they'd need to confront the past more openly. Later that afternoon, Andrew Caldwell gathered a few department heads, including Paul, in his office. He expressed urgency about launching the new campaign. We're going to push up deadlines, Andrew announced. I want an initial pitch to go live in under 6 weeks. Paul felt his stomach clench. It was a tight timeline, and it meant many late nights and intense brainstorming sessions. It also meant more time working alongside Margot. He nodded politely, forcing himself to speak up. "We'll make it happen, sir." Andrew seemed pleased. "I have full confidence in both the creative and marketing teams. Margot's vision and your expertise in execution should make a powerhouse combination." Paul managed to maintain a steady front in Andrew's presence, but as he left the office, he felt the weight of this pressure. His job security, his ambition to climb higher, and his emotional entanglements were all converging in one place. He knew he had to address the growing tension before it overwhelmed him, yet he couldn't see a clear path forward. Paul stood by the elevator bank late one evening, waiting for the lift to arrive. The office was mostly empty, save for a few lights on the upper floors. He was about to head home when the elevator doors slid open to reveal Margot inside. She seemed equally surprised to see him, pausing for a split second before gesturing for him to enter. He stepped in, pressing the button for the ground floor. Silence stretched between them. The faint hum of the elevator accentuated the tension, each second thick with unspoken words. It was the first moment they'd been alone since the gala. "So," Margot began softly, "late night." He nodded. "Had to finalize some data for tomorrow's meeting." "You?" "Prepping the creative briefs. I want to have something tangible for the next brainstorming session." Neither of them mentioned the past, but the memory of their shared history filled the small space. Paul cleared his throat, deciding to address the elephant in the room, even briefly. "Margot, about the other night, at the gala. It caught me off guard to see you there." Her gaze softened, and she lowered her voice. "It caught me off guard to be offered the role here. I only learned you worked at Hawthorne and Pierce after I'd already signed the contract. The firm approached me through a headhunter. It wasn't my intention to cause friction." He believed her. Margot never was one to play petty games, but hearing her speak so calmly about it only magnified his own jumbled emotions. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Where had she been for the past year? Why had she taken this job now? Did she still think of him? Instead, he swallowed his questions. "I understand. I guess we'll both have to figure out how to move forward." The elevator dinged and opened onto the lobby. They stepped out, still enveloped in that charged silence. Just as they were about to part ways, Margot laid a hand gently on his arm. It was a fleeting touch, but it sent a jolt of awareness through him. "I'm not here to stir up the past," she said quietly. "Whatever happened between us, I don't want it to interfere with what we do here." Paul managed a faint nod. "Same here," he whispered. Then she walked away, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. He was left standing, staring at her receding figure, 1,000 memories tugging at his mind. He realized how easily she still affected him. It frightened and intrigued him all at once. That weekend, Paul tried to push Margot from his thoughts. He arranged to meet Vanessa for dinner at a chic restaurant by the waterfront. Candles glimmered on each table, and the gentle lapping of lake waves against the pier provided a serene backdrop. Yet, despite the romance of the setting, Paul struggled to be fully present. Vanessa noticed. "Paul," she said, leaning forward, "I know something's weighing on you. I'm trying to give you space, but I can't pretend I don't notice you pulling away." He felt a pang of guilt. It's the new campaign. The deadlines are intense. And yes, Margot. Vanessa inhaled slowly, setting her napkin down. "I had a feeling she was on your mind. She's your ex-wife. I get that it must be tough, working side by side. But do you still have feelings for her?" His eyes flicked up in alarm. "No, well, not in the way you mean. It's just complicated. We ended on bad terms, and there's a lot of unresolved stuff." She considered his words. "Unresolved can be dangerous. It can grow into something bigger than it needs to be." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I promise, I'm not planning to rekindle anything. I'm with you now. It's just that seeing her again has brought up memories I thought I'd buried. It'll pass once we establish a working rhythm, I'm sure." Vanessa nodded, though her eyes remained cautious. "If that's how you feel, I'll respect it. Just promise to keep me in the loop." "I don't want any secrets," Paul agreed, relieved she was being so understanding, but also feeling the weight of his own uncertainty. He couldn't deny the pull he felt when Margot was near, a subtle reminder of the bond they once shared. Yet, he owed it to Vanessa to keep his actions honorable. As the days went by, the pressure at work increased. Andrew Caldwell announced an upcoming executive dinner where the core leadership team, Margot included, would be present to outline the new campaign's vision. It would be a smaller, more intimate affair than the gala, a chance for everyone to delve deeper into strategies. Paul knew this meant closer contact with Margot, more discussions, and perhaps even forging a collaborative partnership with her. He couldn't quite decide if that notion filled him with hope or dread. Still, every time he closed his eyes, Paul could see the way Margot had looked at him in that elevator, calm, poised, yet holding something unsaid in her eyes. It was a glance he wouldn't soon forget. Paul stood near the large window in his office, eyes tracking the bustle of downtown Chicago below. As he ran a hand through his dark hair, he realized he'd spent the past few minutes lost in thought, wondering how to navigate this new reality. Margot's presence at Hawthorne and Pierce had reopened questions he'd worked so hard to bury. He glanced at the digital clock on his desk. He had exactly 10 minutes before a scheduled lunch with Nathan Green, the friend he often considered a steady voice in moments of doubt. Nathan had chosen a small sandwich shop not far from the office, a place known for its classic Reuben and quiet ambiance. It was nearly empty when Paul arrived. He found Nathan seated at a corner table, sipping iced tea, eyes scanning a printout of something work-related. The smell of toasted rye and melted Swiss cheese mingled with the subdued chatter of a few other patrons. "Hey!" Nathan greeted, folding the paper. "You look like you haven't slept well." Paul shrugged off his coat and took a seat. "It's been a lot. The new campaign, the deadlines Caldwell's imposing, and this unexpected dynamic with Margot." Nathan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "I get it. But from what you've told me, you're dealing with more than just a tough project. You're wrestling with unresolved feelings." Paul let out a dry chuckle. "You could say that." He fell silent for a moment, fiddling with the edge of his napkin. "It's not that I regret moving on. Vanessa's been wonderful, but it's like I never got real closure with Margot." Nathan nodded, motioning to a passing server. Once they placed their orders, Reuben for Nathan, turkey and avocado for Paul, he pinned Paul with a knowing look. Sometimes closure comes when you face things head-on. Avoiding Margot might help you dodge discomfort, but it doesn't solve anything. Paul exhaled. "I know. But the second I'm around her, I either feel guilty because I'm with Vanessa, or I feel this pull toward my past that I'm not sure I want to revisit." Nathan took a slow sip of tea. "Maybe you're giving your past self too much power. You're a different man now than you were a year ago. Margot's probably changed, too. You won't know how to work together, professionally or otherwise, unless you actually talk." Paul rubbed the back of his neck. "I guess I'm afraid of what might happen if I open that door. Vanessa's worried, too, although she's being understanding. She's the one who encouraged me to be honest about what I'm feeling." "Listen," Nathan said, dropping his voice to a sympathetic murmur. "What I'm hearing is you need a clear mind. Decide what role Margot plays in your life now. You've got a big campaign to tackle. You can't do that effectively if half your brain is tied up in regret and old memories." Paul could feel tension tugging at his chest, but at the same time, Nathan's words brought a small sense of relief. There was no secret trick, just the willingness to confront what he'd been running from. Their sandwiches arrived, momentarily distracting them from weightier topics. Paul took a bite, appreciating the fresh bread, though he hardly tasted it with all that lingered in his thoughts. Nathan handed him the printout he'd been reading earlier. "Take a look when you can. It's a draft timeline for the new campaign. If you and Margot are going to collaborate, you'll need to see the big picture. Caldwell wants preliminary concepts in 3 weeks, not 6. We're accelerating." Paul nearly choked on his sandwich. 3 weeks! That's insane. Welcome to Andrew Caldwell's style. Nathan frowned. He's pushing for a bold move to show the board he's all about swift innovation. Frankly, we need Margot's creative team on board 24/7 if we're going to meet that schedule, and marketing has to keep up, meaning you. Paul scanned the paper, feeling the weight of the deadlines. So there's no room for hesitation. I need to get my head in the game. Nathan offered a half smile. Exactly. And if you want some advice from a friend, talk to Margot sooner rather than later. Let go of the fear that one conversation could unravel everything. It might actually set things straight. Paul nodded, folding the paper and tucking it into his jacket pocket. You're right. I'll figure out a way to approach her. For the sake of the campaign and for my own peace of mind. They finished their lunch, conversation drifting toward lighter subjects. Nathan's kids, Paul's upcoming visit to see his mother in the suburbs. But the main point stood firm. Paul had a mentor figure telling him, gently but firmly, that it was time to confront his history. And for the first time since the gala, he felt a small glimmer of determination take root. Later that afternoon, Paul leaned against the wall outside Margot's office, mustering courage to knock. He wasn't exactly certain what he intended to say, only that he wanted to break the ice. The corridor smelled faintly of fresh paint, part of the ongoing office revamp Hawthorne and Pierce had undertaken. Through the glass panel, he saw her typing at her computer, brow furrowed in concentration. He raised his hand to rap on the door, but it flew open before he could. Margot stood there, startled for a split second. "Oh, Paul," she said, regaining composure. "I was just about to run down to HR. Did you need something?" He cleared his throat. "I was hoping we could talk about the new campaign, about everything." She exhaled quietly. "Now's not the best time, but let me finish with HR. Then maybe we can grab coffee in the lounge." Paul nodded, forcing a small smile. "Sure, that works." An hour later, they found themselves in the company lounge, a modest space furnished with comfy chairs and a coffee station. The hum of the vending machine created a soft background buzz. Margot poured herself a cup of black coffee, while Paul picked a herbal tea, a habit he'd picked up recently in an attempt to curb caffeine jitters. They settled into a corner, cautiously aware of each other. Margot spoke first, stirring her coffee. "Look, I realize this is awkward. It's not every day you end up working with someone you once shared a life with, but I'm committed to doing a good job here, and I don't want personal history to get in the way." Paul nodded, clasping his hands. "I feel the same. I'm not here to make things uncomfortable. I just didn't expect you. Well, I didn't expect to see you again at all. And I guess I have to adjust." She sipped from her cup, her gaze drifting momentarily to the window, where a glimpse of the Chicago skyline peeked through. "I've changed a lot since we parted, spent some time freelancing, exploring different creative fields. This opportunity came up, and it was too good to pass. I learned you were here only after I'd signed. If I'd known, I might have hesitated. But maybe it's for the best we face each other." Paul let her words sink in. There was a time when they confided in each other daily, hopes, dreams, fears. Now they spoke like near strangers. "I understand. And for the record, I'm not harboring bitterness about the job. You clearly have a strong portfolio, or Caldwell wouldn't have hired you. She managed a small, appreciative smile. Thank you. A few colleagues entered the lounge, filling cups and exchanging pleasantries. Paul noticed how Margot's posture stiffened slightly, as if she were bracing for onlookers' curiosity. He lowered his voice. Maybe we should meet outside the office sometime to sort out, I don't know, boundaries. I need to be fair to Vanessa, and I also need to be fair to myself. I don't want to keep tiptoeing around you. Margot set her coffee down, considering his suggestion. That might be wise. Look, Paul, I'm okay talking things through as long as we keep it civil. We both have different lives now. He forced a quick nod, though an unnamed emotion curled inside him. Different lives, yes. Let's keep it professional and respectful. They lingered for a moment, sipping their drinks. It was the longest private conversation they'd had since the divorce. The atmosphere was uneasy, but not outright hostile, a step beyond the stilted formality they'd shown in meetings. That evening, Paul relayed the gist of this conversation to Vanessa, who listened with guarded composure as they sat together in his apartment's living room. The low lamplight highlighted the concern etched on her face. So, you're planning to meet outside the office? Vanessa clarified. Paul nodded, noticing the tension in her shoulders. Just to establish some clarity, maybe bury the hatchet once and for all, then it can truly be about work. Vanessa tried to smile, though her voice betrayed a flicker of insecurity. I'm glad you're being proactive. I only hope it goes the way you want. Paul reached for her hand. I hope so too. I don't want you to worry. This is about tying loose ends, not reopening old wounds. Despite his words of reassurance, Paul felt a growing sense of stepping into uncharted territory. His so-called comfort zone of ignoring the past was no longer tenable. Meeting Margot outside the familiar walls of Hawthorne and Pierce felt like crossing an invisible boundary, one where unresolved questions might demand honest answers. The path ahead held uncertainty, but he was beginning to accept that facing Margot might be the only way to truly move forward. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Paul found himself standing on the sidewalk in Wicker Park, just outside a cozy cafe called Morningside Roast. The sign above the door was painted in warm hues, and inside, sunlight flooded through floor-to-ceiling windows. He checked his watch, reminding himself he was here by choice, to meet Margot, to have the conversation they both knew was overdue. Margot arrived wearing a casual sweater and dark jeans, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. It was jarring for Paul to see her in something other than business attire, reminding him of a time when they spent weekends exploring local art galleries or trying new brunch spots. She paused briefly when she spotted him, then offered a cordial hello. A soft jazz tune greeted them as they stepped inside. The cafe smelled of espresso and freshly baked pastries. They found a small table near the back, away from the main bustle. Margot took a seat across from Paul, folding her hands on the wooden tabletop. "This feels surreal," she admitted, glancing around. "Sitting in a cafe with you, talking like we're old acquaintances?" Paul gave a small nod, placing his phone face down to avoid distractions. "I know, but I'm glad we're doing it. Might help us find solid ground." A waiter approached, and they placed modest orders, an herbal tea for her, a cappuccino for him. Silence settled as they waited, both searching for the right words to bridge the year that had passed since their divorce. Eventually, Paul cleared his throat. "Look, I don't want to dwell on every painful detail of our past, but I realize we never had a proper conversation about what went wrong. We just parted." Margot gazed at the table. At the time, it felt like there was no use talking further. We were caught in a cycle of arguments, hurt feelings, long nights at the office for you, and resentment building up in me. I think I believed walking away was the only option. He took in her words, recalling the final months of their marriage. Work had consumed him. Margot's creative pursuits had taken her in a separate direction. They had grown apart without addressing the widening gap. "I regret a lot of how I handled that period," he admitted quietly. "I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, I lost sight of what mattered at home." "I'm sorry." Margot's eyes flickered with something akin to sadness. "I appreciate that. I'm sorry, too, for not voicing my frustrations sooner, for letting everything bottle up until I couldn't stay." Their drinks arrived, granting a brief pause. Margot blew on her tea, and Paul sipped his cappuccino, wincing slightly at the bitter foam. Through the window, the neighborhood traffic flowed steadily. People passing by with grocery bags or walking dogs, completely unaware of the emotional conversation unfolding inside the cafe. After a moment, Margot spoke again. "Since leaving, I've worked hard to rediscover what I wanted in my career. When Hawthorne and Pierce approached me, it felt like a breakthrough. I didn't imagine it would bring us face to face." Paul set his cup down. "I understand. Now we're here, forced to cooperate on a major campaign with an almost impossible deadline." He let a rueful smile form. "Life sure has a sense of irony." She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "It does. But maybe this is an opportunity to prove we can handle things differently. We're not the same people we were a year ago." He caught the subtle emphasis in her words. "No, we're not. I'm with someone now, Vanessa. She's been a rock for me in a lot of ways. I owe it to her to be honest and respectful." Margot inclined her head. "I'm glad you found someone who supports you. I truly am." The sincerity in her tone was clear, though it carried a hint of wistfulness. They talked a bit longer, discussing a plan for how they might manage the impending campaign tasks. Margot suggested weekly sync-ups with both teams present to ensure no overlap or missed deadlines. Paul agreed to coordinate with marketing staff for data analysis. In a calm, methodical manner, they outlined what they hoped would be a smooth collaboration. Underneath the professional discussion, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They were taking a careful step into new territory, one that required honesty and personal growth. The fear that had kept Paul hesitant to talk to Margot was slowly giving way to a cautious willingness to see her as a colleague, maybe even a friend, albeit one with a significant shared history. As they exited the cafe, a gentle breeze rustled Margot's hair. She looked up at the sky, then back at Paul. "I guess we'll see how this goes." Paul exhaled. "Yes, we will, one day at a time." Neither of them tried to hug or linger. They parted with polite smiles, each carrying the weight of memories that still shaped their every step. For Paul, it felt like crossing into a new phase, an uncertain but necessary one, where he might finally put old ghosts to rest and embrace the possibility of forging a healthier relationship with the woman he once loved. The following week brought a flurry of activity at Hawthorne and Pierce. With the accelerated timeline, Paul and Margot found themselves in near-constant communication, drafting proposals, coordinating with sub-teams, meeting with clients over video calls. Word spread fast that the two ex-spouses were working closely, raising eyebrows in some corners of the office. One morning, Paul waited outside the conference room for Margot to arrive so they could finalize the creative brief before presenting it to Andrew Caldwell. As employees shuffled by, he overheard whispered remarks, curiosity or speculation about the exes who seemed to be handling their partnership better than anyone had expected. He tried to ignore the gossip, focusing on the task at hand. Margot arrived, carrying a tablet loaded with design mock-ups. She gave Paul a cordial nod, then stepped inside. They arranged their materials on the table, preparing for Andrew's arrival. "I spoke to the graphic design team last night," she told him quietly. "They're making final tweaks to the visuals. We should have updated files within the hour." He scanned the bullet points on his own notes. Great. Marketing's compiled data on consumer behavior. It'll help shape our narrative. We can show Caldwell how our approach aligns with the brand's ethos. Andrew breezed in, flanked by Sarah Collins from PR and a junior associate named Lucy. After brief introductions, Margot launched into her overview of the creative direction, emphasizing authenticity, storytelling that appeals to the client's emotional core. Paul interjected with key data points supporting the strategy, painting a picture of a cohesive campaign. Caldwell nodded in approval, occasionally firing off questions that Margot and Paul answered in tandem. The synergy between them was evident. Sarah even commented, "It's good to see you two complement each other's perspectives so well." Under the surface, though, Paul felt a nerve-wracking tension. He was aware of the silent, shared history that could overshadow them if they let it. Every now and then, he sensed Margot's guarded glance, as if she was equally conscious of the balancing act they performed. When the meeting concluded, Caldwell was pleased. "Excellent progress. Keep this momentum going, and we might roll out the campaign earlier than planned." He offered a rare grin before gathering his papers and leaving. Sarah paused on her way out, looking between Paul and Margot with a subtle curiosity. "I'm impressed. If you two need any PR assistance, just let me know." Her tone carried a hint of personal intrigue, but she remained professional enough to walk away without pressing further. Once alone, Paul loosened his tie and exhaled. "That went well," he said. Margot nodded, powering off her tablet. "I think so. Your data points really solidified the approach. Your creative flair is what sold him," Paul replied. They tidied up in silence. There was a sense of relief in the room, like they had passed a small test. Still, the tension lingered, unacknowledged yet undeniably present. Later that day, Paul dropped by the graphic design department to review some mock-ups. Seated at her desk was Jessica Martin, a talented designer in her late 20s with a sharp eye for color palettes. She greeted Paul with a friendly wave. "I've just finished adjusting the color scheme on Margot's request," Jessica explained, clicking through several slides on her screen. "We toned down the bright oranges to a more subtle palette that aligns with the brand's existing identity." Paul nodded, impressed. "That's perfect. The brand guidelines emphasize consistency, and this fits." He took a moment to appreciate Jessica's patience, given the ever-changing demands from both marketing and creative. "Thanks for the quick turnaround." Jessica shrugged, shooting him a conspiratorial grin. "No problem, but to be honest, I've never seen two leads jump on the same page as fast as you and Margot. It's like you're finishing each other's sentences sometimes." He stiffened slightly, clearing his throat. "We, have known each other a while." She shrugged, turning back to her screen. "Whatever it is, it's helping us move fast. Keep it up." As he walked back to his office, Paul realized he was simultaneously relieved and unsettled by how smoothly things were going. A voice in his head whispered that they were glossing over unresolved feelings, leaning too quickly into a professional camaraderie. It felt like playing a delicate game of balance. One misstep, and they could plunge into emotional chaos. On his way out of the building that evening, Paul bumped into Margot in the lobby. She was gathering her coat, a tired look in her eyes. "Long day," she murmured. He nodded. "Long but productive." "See you tomorrow." She gave a brief smile. "Yes, tomorrow." In that brief exchange, Paul sensed the careful equilibrium they had established. Both were abiding by a new set of unwritten rules, born from shared history and a mutual desire not to derail the campaign, or their own lives. For now, at least, it seemed to be working. After another intense week, Andrew Caldwell called for a brainstorming session in the main conference room, inviting multiple departments to contribute fresh angles on the campaign. Paul arrived early, wanting to ensure everything was set up. The large oval table was surrounded by comfortable chairs, while a digital screen dominated one wall, displaying the Hawthorne and Pierce logo. He was soon joined by a variety of people, Nathan as, of course, representing strategic planning, Sarah Collins from PR, Jessica Martin from design, and a few others who had valuable insights. Margot walked in last, greeting everyone with a warm, professional smile. She took a seat near the center, tablet in hand. Andrew commenced the session by highlighting the campaign's tight timeline and high expectations. Then he turned it over to Margot. She stood, addressing the group with confidence. I want to gather your ideas on how to connect emotionally with our target audience. We've laid out the broad strokes, but what small stories can we tell? Nathan spoke up first, proposing a series of mini-narratives that showcased real-life client experiences. Sarah added that a behind-the-scenes look at the product's development could enhance transparency. Jessica pitched a concept involving short animated clips to bring the brand's values to life in a playful way. As Paul listened, he couldn't help but be impressed with how smoothly Margot directed the conversation, giving everyone a chance to speak. He chimed in, suggesting that they reinforce these emotional elements with hard data, statistics indicating how consumer trust increases when brands engage in genuine storytelling. Margot acknowledged his point, weaving it into the conversation without missing a beat. In the midst of this back and forth, Paul realized they were forming a core group of allies. These colleagues were just as invested in the campaign's success as he and Margot were. The lingering tension of the X's working together dynamic seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a unified goal. After nearly 2 hours, the session wrapped up with a flurry of note-taking and excited chatter. Andrew departed, satisfied with the progress. A few smaller conversations continued around the table, pockets of collaboration forming. Nathan and Sarah approached Margot and Paul together. Sarah, a confident woman in her mid-30s with a perceptive smile, said, "I really think we're onto something. Our PR angle, combined with these personal client stories, could be powerful." Nathan nodded. "Agreed. We just need to keep up this momentum. You too," he pointed between Paul and Margot, "should probably lead regular check-ins to ensure we don't lose steam." Margot glanced at Paul, then looked back at Sarah and Nathan. "We're scheduling weekly alignment meetings with design, PR, and marketing. Maybe we can also have an open Slack channel for daily updates." Paul agreed. That would help everyone share progress in real time. As the four continued talking, it became clear that each brought a unique perspective. Nathan had a gift for seeing logistical roadblocks before they happened, while Sarah excelled at anticipating public perception. Margot's creativity served as the campaign's beating heart, and Paul's analytical approach anchored it in measurable goals. Jessica joined them momentarily, smiling at the synergy. "We're unstoppable," she joked, to which they all laughed. The atmosphere was light, like a newly forged team who knew they could rely on each other. Eventually, the group broke apart, heading back to their respective tasks. Paul walked Margot to her office, carrying a small stack of printouts. "I'm feeling good about this," he remarked. "Having allies across departments means we're not doing all the heavy lifting ourselves." Margot nodded, tucking a stray strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "It's nice to see people bonding over a shared vision rather than gossiping about our personal history." She gave him a pointed look. "Not that I blame them, but it's refreshing to have real collaboration." Paul suppressed a smile. "Agreed. I think the best way to shift the narrative is by showing results. And if we succeed, the rest won't matter as much." She pushed open the door to her office. "Couldn't have said it better myself. Speaking of which, I'll refine these concepts tonight and circle back tomorrow. He handed her the stack of documents. Perfect. I'll review the marketing data again and, Margot, thanks for letting everyone see how capable you are. This campaign matters a lot to the company, and to me personally. Her expression softened. It matters to me, too. A lot. A quick nod, and Paul turned to leave. As he walked away, he felt a sense of unity and purpose that extended beyond his complicated personal situation. For the first time, he truly believed that working with Margot could be more than a minefield of unresolved emotions. It could be an opportunity to prove they had both grown and to do something remarkable with a team of people who were becoming more than just co-workers. Allies were forming, and with them, a strengthened resolve to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. It was late on a Thursday evening when Paul got a frantic call from Sarah. She sounded tense, her voice tinny over the phone. Have you checked the competitor's latest campaign? They just launched a massive rebranding push that looks eerily similar to what we've been discussing. I'm worried they might have beaten us to the punch. Paul's heart sank. He thanked Sarah for the heads up and immediately fired up his laptop. Indeed, their biggest competitor, Delmont and Creed, had released a series of online ads. The tone, the focus on customer storytelling, even the color palette, they all bore a striking resemblance to what Hawthorne and Pierce had in the works. He dashed off an urgent email to Margot, copying Nathan, Jessica, and Sarah. Within minutes, replies flew back and forth, everyone expressing concern, brainstorming how to differentiate their campaign or speed up their own launch. A quick Zoom call was arranged for that very night. Paul connected first, adjusting his camera in his living room, the city lights twinkling behind him through the apartment window. One by one, the team joined. Margot, hair tied back, face reflecting a mix of exhaustion and determination. Nathan, looking somber. Jessica, brows furrowed as she juggled design mock-ups on a second screen. Sarah, calmer now, but obviously unsettled. They spent the next hour dissecting Delmont and Creed's campaign. The parallels were undeniable. While it wasn't a direct copy, the resemblance felt too close for comfort. The possibility of a leak briefly crossed Paul's mind, but with no evidence, they chalked it up to both agencies tapping into similar market trends. Margot spoke up, voice low but steady. We can't afford to give up on our concept, but we might need to pivot to avoid appearing like we're playing catch-up, Jessica added. What if we adjust the visuals to create a stronger, more distinctive identity? We still use real stories, but incorporate a different style, maybe a documentary-like approach. Paul nodded. We have data that shows how behind-the-scenes clips resonate with consumers. If we shift focus to highlight the process, we could stand out from what Delmont and Creed is doing. Nathan rubbed his eyes. We're on a tight timeline already. Any major pivot could mean working around the clock. Margot's gaze swept across the screen, landing on each person in turn. If we stay calm and focus, we can do this. We'll need all hands on deck. Let's come up with a revised outline by tomorrow afternoon, present it to Caldwell, and see how quickly we can implement changes. Everyone agreed, though the tension was palpable. Paul glimpsed a subdued worry on each face, including Margot's. The call ended on a note of controlled urgency, no one certain how the leadership would react to this sudden curveball. The next morning, they gathered in the largest conference room for an emergency meeting with Andrew Caldwell. He was stern-faced, his usual charismatic demeanor replaced by a sharp edge. Margot led the presentation with her revised direction. Jessica showcased modified design concepts, and Paul supplied fresh data. Everyone spoke in turn, hoping to convince the CEO that a pivot was not only possible, but necessary. Midway through the discussion, Andrew's frustration erupted. How could Delmont and Creed launch something so similar without us knowing? We've sunk considerable resources into this campaign. I want to ensure we're not trailing behind them." Margot stiffened, her posture tightening. "We weren't informed of any leaks, sir. It's likely parallel thinking in the industry. Our pivot is designed to differentiate us, and we can roll it out quickly if we get the green light." Andrew turned his gaze to Paul. "And your department is ready to support this pivot?" Paul nodded, his tone firm. "We are, provided we have full cooperation from design and PR. We're all hands on deck." A tense silence followed. Caldwell drummed his fingers on the table, his jaw set. Finally, he relented with a curt nod. "Fine, do it, but I expect no delays. This has to be airtight." As the team filed out, relief mixed with renewed anxiety. The real work was about to begin. Late nights, tight deadlines, constant revisions. In the corridor, Margot turned to Paul, eyes flickering with an emotional storm. "This is huge. We need to be cohesive or it'll all fall apart." Paul swallowed. "I know. Let's gather the team and get started." But just as they were about to set plans in motion, a voice called out from behind them. Jennifer Shea, one of the junior project coordinators, approached looking flustered. "I overheard a conversation in the break room. Some staff are blaming either you or Margot for tipping off Delmont and Creed. Gossip's spreading fast." Paul exchanged a dismayed look with Margot. The notion that either of them could be suspected of leaking ideas, especially given their history, stung like a fresh wound. A spark of anger flared in Margot's eyes. "That's absurd. It's not true, of course," Jennifer hurried to add, "but people talk." They realized they faced not only an external threat, but also an internal suspicion. The first real clash was here, at the crossroads of professional tension and personal baggage, and it threatened to unhinge the fragile trust they'd begun to rebuild. Paul trudged into the office early the next morning, weighed down by the latest crisis. Although he and Margot had weathered challenges before, the sudden appearance of a similar campaign at Delmont and Creed felt like a direct attack on their work. Even more distressing were the rumors circulating that either he or Margot might have leaked the ideas. It was almost too much for him to process. He dropped his coat on the back of his chair and powered on his computer. As emails began loading, each new message seemed more urgent than the last. Tension radiated throughout Hawthorne and Pierce. In a matter of days, the atmosphere had shifted from excitement to suspicion, and Paul could sense that the series of trials was only beginning. A knock on his door startled him. Nathan entered with a grim expression. "Morning," Nathan muttered, tossing a thick folder onto Paul's desk. "I consolidated everything we have on the competitors' campaign. Jessica and Sarah contributed. It's not good. There are overlapping themes, colors, narratives. Caldwell wants an immediate plan on how we'll differentiate." Paul rubbed the bridge of his nose. "If we can't prove uniqueness, we risk clients seeing us as second best. We need a fresh angle, something strong enough to overshadow Delmont and Creed's launch." Nathan's voice was low. "We also need to address the gossip. Some folks believe there's a mole in our team. It's eroding trust. If it keeps going, we'll spend more time defending ourselves than creating solutions." Paul grimaced. "I'll talk to Margot about it. We can't let this poison the team spirit." Before Nathan could respond, Paul's phone buzzed. Margot was calling. He picked up to hear her voice in a hurried whisper. "Can you come up to the creative department? We've had a development with Jessica's designs." He and Nathan exchanged glances. "On our way." In the creative wing, they found Margot huddled with Jessica and Sarah around a large mood board pinned to a wall. Color swatches, sketches, and concept notes covered the surface. Jessica pointed to a sequence of images. "I stayed up late revising the visuals." Jessica explained. But then I found out Delmont and Creed has also uploaded short videos on social media, almost like behind-the-scenes teasers. Sarah frowned. They're definitely stepping on our toes. We can't just keep reacting to them. Margot turned to Paul and Nathan. I'm done playing defense. We should embrace a bolder narrative that only we can tell. If Delmont and Creed wants to highlight behind the scenes, we go deeper, show clients the actual faces and personal stories behind each product, from inception to completion. Something truly transparent. Paul inhaled sharply. That means shooting real documentary-style footage, interviews, day-in-the-life segments. That's a lot of work in a short time frame. Margot's eyes flickered with resolve. I know, but this is a test of how far we're willing to push ourselves. If we pull it off, we'll have a campaign that can't be mistaken for anyone else's. A ripple of agreement passed through the group. They talked specifics, dividing responsibilities. Sarah would handle logistics for filming. Jessica would adapt her designs for a documentary-like feel. Margot and Paul would shape the storytelling arc, ensuring data and narrative remained balanced. Nathan would coordinate the schedule to meet Caldwell's pressing deadlines. Near the end of their discussion, Margot glanced around, lowering her voice. There's still the issue of trust. We need to address the rumors head-on, or we'll never function as a unified team. Jessica nodded vigorously. Some folks actually asked me if I'd seen you or Paul rummaging through confidential files. It's ridiculous, but the suspicion is there. Sarah added, I've tried to tamp down the gossip, but it's stubborn. People are whispering about how the two of you once shared a life, implying maybe one of you has divided loyalties. It's unfair, but it's happening. Paul clenched his fists. The idea that anyone believed he or Margot would sabotage the campaign was infuriating. We have to prove them wrong by our actions, he said. Constant transparency with the team, status updates, shared folders, open discussions. Let's show we're not hiding anything. Margot agreed, though a shadow crossed her features. We should do it together, in front of everyone. Make a statement that we're united. If the rumor persists, it'll only get worse. With that decided, they moved to wrap up. Despite the challenges, the meeting ended on a note of cautious optimism. The entire group recognized they were entering a round of intense, back-to-back tests, both in terms of creating a unique campaign and quelling internal doubts. Afterward, Paul spotted Margot alone, flipping through a storyboard. He lingered, hesitating. Finally, he spoke softly. We'll get through this, right? She offered a small, tight-lipped smile. We have to. Let's just remember it's not only about what we create, but how we stand together under pressure. He nodded, wishing he felt as certain as she sounded. The swirl of suspicion, the looming deadlines, the echoes of their past, all formed a series of tests he wasn't sure he could pass. But for now, there was no choice but to press on. A rumble of thunder echoed across the Chicago skyline late that afternoon, as dark clouds gathered over the city. From his 10th-floor office window, Paul watched the lightning dance above the high-rises, reflecting momentarily on how the storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside him. For the next few hours, Paul buried himself in data analysis, trying to adapt marketing strategies for the revised documentary-style concept. Yet no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't erase his underlying doubts. Thoughts of Margot kept sneaking into his mind, memories of their past arguments, their hopes for the future, and the bitterness that eventually drove them apart. Now, forced to collaborate, he realized he still carried guilt for not fighting hard enough to save their marriage. The internal conflict extended beyond his relationship with Margot. There was also Vanessa, who had become distant in recent days. The mounting demands of work had pulled him away from her emotionally, and although she'd been understanding, a subtle strain weighed on their interactions. He resented the part of himself that felt drawn to Margot, an old emotional bond that both comforted and haunted him. As the rain began to pour, he received a call from Vanessa. He answered, relieved for a temporary reprieve. "Hey," her gentle voice came through, layered with concern. "Are you still at the office?" "Yeah, I'll be here a while," Paul admitted, leaning back in his chair. "We had a setback with the campaign." "I figured," Vanessa murmured. "I saw the weather report. Just be careful if you're driving late. Don't push yourself too hard." He hesitated, bracing for the conversation he knew was overdue. "I'm sorry I haven't been around much. Work's been crazy. And Margot's role in all this," Vanessa sighed. "It's not your fault, but I miss you. We haven't had a moment to talk about anything other than your deadlines." He swallowed. "I know. Let me finish up, and we'll talk tomorrow. Maybe dinner." "That sounds nice," she replied, a hint of longing in her voice. "I love you." Paul felt a twist of guilt. He took a moment before responding, "I love you too," and ended the call. He stared at his phone, recalling how easy it was to say those words to Margot once, and how natural they now felt with Vanessa. Yet the sense of emotional turbulence remained. Later that evening, Margot appeared at his door, a stack of storyboards under her arm. She looked exhausted, her hair slightly damp from the drizzle she must have encountered on her way back from another department. "Got a minute?" she asked, stepping into his office. He cleared some papers off a chair. "Sure. What's up?" She set the storyboards on his desk, flipping through them to reveal sketches of potential documentary scenes. "We're thinking of highlighting everyday heroes, employees, partners, customers, people with personal stories tied to the brand. But we need marketing's input on how to structure these narratives." Paul forced himself to focus. "Yes, absolutely. We could start with short interviews, maybe even user-generated segments that we can compile. Let's gather real testimonials." Margot nodded, but her gaze drifted to the window where rain pelted the glass. "Looks pretty bad out there," she said softly. He followed her line of sight. "Yeah, storm's kicking up." She hesitated, then added, "I know this campaign is overshadowed by a lot of personal stuff. I can't pretend I don't sense your stress." "Or that I don't have my own," Paul exhaled, rubbing his neck. "I'm juggling conflicts inside and outside of work. I'm sure you are, too. Maybe once we get over this hurdle, we can talk more honestly." Her eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or yearning. "For now, let's just keep going. One step at a time." They spent the next hour discussing how best to capture the core message, authenticity through real stories. Despite the tension between them, they managed a productive session, refining storyboard details and deciding on the next steps for filming. It was as if they existed in two overlapping realms, one where professional synergy flowed naturally, and another where old wounds and lingering emotions threatened to surface. Near midnight, the storm reached its peak, rattling the windows. Margot stood to leave, gathering the scattered sketches into a neat pile. "Thanks, Paul. I'll coordinate with Jessica in the morning." He nodded. "Yeah, get home safe." She left, and he listened to the echo of her footsteps fade down the hallway. He felt drained, torn between the responsibilities of his present life and the unresolved regrets of his past. The conflict raged on, wearing him down a little more each day. Only one thing was clear. The campaign demanded every ounce of skill and collaboration they could muster, whether or not his heart had found peace. The next week tested everyone's limits. With the revised plan for a documentary-style campaign in motion, teams scrambled to secure filming locations, schedule interviews, and finalize visual assets. The halls of Hawthorne and Pierce buzzed with a frenetic energy that blurred days into nights. Paul and Margot found themselves visiting a production studio on the outskirts of Chicago, where they hoped to capture authentic footage of a long-time product engineer narrating his journey. They stepped into the studio, greeted by glaring lights, tripods, and a bustle of crew. This was exactly the kind of material that could set their campaign apart from the competition. Yet, as soon as they arrived, problems arose. The engineer had car trouble and was running late. The camera equipment malfunctioned, and a replacement had to be sourced from another department across town. The time wasted only added to the mounting pressure. While waiting, Margot paced, phone in hand. "Caldwell won't like this. We're already behind schedule." Paul checked the time. "We can reschedule the interview for tomorrow, but it'll push everything else back." Margot paused in her pacing. "We don't have that luxury. Delmont and Creed is already rolling out new teasers. If we don't get at least a sample video out soon, we'll look like amateurs." Friction rose between them as the reality of the tight timeline struck hard. Their voices escalated briefly, frustration twisting into argument. Paul exhaled heavily. "Look, I'm not blaming you for these delays, but we need a backup plan if the engineer can't make it." Margot's eyes flashed. "I'm doing everything I can." This was supposed to be a straightforward shoot, and yet here we are. "Maybe you can call in some of your marketing contacts to pull strings." He fought to keep his tone calm. "Fine, I'll see if I can get someone else on short notice. But we can't keep pivoting like this. The budget is tight, and Caldwell's patience is wearing thin." Tension crackled between them until the engineer finally arrived, apologizing profusely. They rushed through the shoot, capturing what they could, but by the time they wrapped, everyone was on edge, uncertain whether the footage met the high standards they'd set. Returning to the office that night, Paul found Andrew Caldwell in the corridor, arms crossed. The CEO's normally approachable manner had hardened into steely disapproval. "Word is the filming didn't go smoothly," Caldwell said, not bothering with pleasantries. Paul kept his composure. "We got some usable footage, but we're running a bit behind schedule." Caldwell's gaze flicked over to Margot. "You two assured me this new direction would be better than the last concept, yet I see more snags and rising costs." Margot swallowed. "We're working out the kinks. The documentary approach takes more coordination, but it'll be worth it once it's complete." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "I hope so. Because if this campaign falls flat, it's on both of you." He walked away, leaving them standing in the dim hallway, an uneasy silence between them. Paul felt the weight of that warning like a stone. "Seems like Caldwell's got us on the chopping block," Margot muttered, rubbing her temples. Paul nodded. "We can't afford more setbacks." Later that evening, Paul tried calling Vanessa to decompress, but she didn't answer. He left a voicemail, telling her he missed her. A sense of helplessness churned in his gut. He felt cornered on all fronts. At the same time, the rumor mill about a potential leak refused to die down. Some employees still eyed him and Margot suspiciously, as if the chaos they faced was their own doing. A sense of near despair settled over the creative and marketing teams. Every small error loomed large, each delay compounded by Caldwell's impatience. Meetings were filled with tension and second-guessing. Jessica's designs had to be revamped a third time when Caldwell demanded a brighter color scheme, clashing with Margot's aesthetic preferences. Even Nathan, usually cool-headed, showed signs of stress, snapping at co-workers who asked routine questions. One night, Paul found himself alone in his office, the rest of the floor dark. He stared at the latest version of the presentation slides, reading and rereading the bullet points until they blurred. The obstacles felt insurmountable. Delmont and Creed's head start, the persistent rumors, Caldwell's scrutiny, and the personal friction brewing beneath the surface. He rested his forehead on the edge of his desk, listening to the low hum of the overhead lights. He wished he could see a clear path through the chaos, but at that moment, the campaign and his fragile personal balance felt one step away from crumbling altogether. In the midst of the storm, a small ray of hope emerged. Sarah Collins arranged for a high-profile client to participate in the documentary approach, providing a compelling personal story that aligned perfectly with Hawthorne and Pierce's brand values. The client, a well-known entrepreneur named Elizabeth Rowe, had built her company from scratch and credited much of her success to the firm's marketing tools. Early in the morning, Paul and Margot drove out to Elizabeth's suburban office. Housed in a renovated brick building, the space reflected her scrappy yet sophisticated spirit, exposed beams, modern furniture, and an air of confident innovation. Elizabeth greeted them warmly, her demeanor sharp but welcoming. "It's an honor to be part of this campaign," Elizabeth said, gesturing for them to sit. "Your tools helped me expand my business, and I'd love to share that journey." Margot offered a genuine smile, flipping open a folder. "We'd like to film an interview, maybe follow you through a typical workday, capturing candid moments. This content would show how you use our services to innovate." Elizabeth nodded. "I'm game. When do you want to start?" An hour later, camera equipment was rolling. As Elizabeth walked them through her bustling space, employees paused to say hello. She showcased how she interacted with Hawthorne and Pierce's marketing platforms, displaying real-time analytics, highlighting branding materials, and explaining how it helped shape her company's identity. Paul, observing from behind the crew, felt a surge of optimism. Everything seemed to click. Elizabeth had a knack for being candid, yet charming, and the footage captured her genuine excitement. Margot, guiding the interview, asked thoughtful questions that highlighted both the personal and professional angles. The synergy they'd hoped for, raw storytelling anchored in authenticity, was unfolding right before their eyes. By the end of the shoot, they had hours of video to edit, but everyone sensed they'd struck gold. Elizabeth personally thanked them before they left. "I believe in what you're doing. Let me know if you need anything else." Outside, the late afternoon sun peeked through scattered clouds, casting a warm glow over the parking lot. Paul and Margot headed to their car, carrying equipment and a shared sense of relief. Margot exhaled, her shoulders dropping. "I think this is the kind of material that can set us apart. If we package it right, we'll overshadow Delmont and Creed's campaign." Paul nodded. She was perfect. Authentic, successful, relatable. Caldwell will love this, assuming we do a solid job editing. They made their way back to the office, reviewing the footage with Jessica, Sarah, and Nathan. Everyone lit up at the raw content, pointing out snippets that conveyed genuine human interest. This was the breakthrough they needed, a small but significant victory after weeks of pressure. "It's going to take a few sleepless nights to edit," Jessica admitted. "But it'll be worth it. I see major potential here." Sarah winked at Margot. "Fantastic job guiding the conversation. You have a real talent for drawing out people's stories." Margot blushed slightly. "Thanks. Elizabeth made it easy." Andrew Caldwell was summoned to the editing room for a preview of some early cuts. He stood with his arms folded, face unreadable, as the video played. Once it finished, he turned to the group. "This is good," he stated, a hint of approval in his voice. "A lot better than what I've been seeing from our competitors. Keep refining it, and let's aim to release a teaser by early next week." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. For a moment, the tension lifted. Caldwell even offered a faint smile, albeit fleeting. "All right," he said, nodding firmly. "Carry on." He left with a purposeful stride, leaving them to bask in this small triumph. As the team dispersed, Paul lingered behind with Margot, their gazes meeting. Both looked exhausted but victorious. Nice work, Paul said softly. She allowed herself a grin. You too. I think we needed this. He agreed. Despite the swirl of pressure and personal complications, they had managed a tangible success. A part of him still felt uneasy, knowing rumors persisted and the main campaign was far from complete. But this was a turning point. That evening, Paul tried calling Vanessa again. This time, she picked up, her tone lighter than before. Hey, stranger, she teased. Heard you had a good day at work. He smiled. Yeah, we finally caught a break. I'd love to see you soon. Maybe celebrate a bit. Vanessa's gentle laugh warmed him. I'd like that. How about tomorrow night? Perfect, he said, feeling the tension in his chest ease. For once, he had a piece of good news to share, a small victory in the ongoing storm. And as he ended the call, he felt a renewed sense of hope, even if the path ahead still held plenty of unknowns. For the next few days, the office buzzed with the energy of a team on the upswing. Editing sessions ran late into the night as Jessica compiled Elizabeth Rowe's footage into a compelling narrative. Sarah drafted press releases, while Nathan crafted an aggressive but achievable project timeline. Margot and Paul worked in close tandem, each focusing on their strengths, her creative direction and his data-driven strategy. Despite the recent victory, everyone sensed that the real battle still loomed. Delmont and Creed continued pumping out new content, determined to dominate the market. The board at Hawthorne and Pierce watched closely, more impatient with each passing day. Caldwell, though temporarily appeased, expected a polished final product that would definitively crush the competition's momentum. Late one evening, Margot and Paul found themselves in the main conference room, empty except for them and the hum of air conditioning. The long table was scattered with printouts, half-empty coffee cups, and reference images. The faint glow from the overhead lights highlighted their tired expressions. Margot gestured to a series of storyboards. If we weave Elizabeth's story with a few more personal vignettes, we can make the message universal. Show that small business owners, charities, and big corporations alike benefit from our tools. Paul studied the images, noting how each segment could appeal to a different demographic. Yes, and from a marketing angle, that diversification tells potential clients we understand their unique needs. They paused, eyes meeting. The flicker of mutual pride was evident. Against the odds, they had found a rhythm, a genuine partnership fueled by respect for each other's talents. For a moment, Paul was reminded of the early days of their marriage, when they tackled challenges together like a unified force. The thought sparked conflicting emotions, relief at their renewed teamwork and regret for what was lost. Eventually, Paul cleared his throat. We're getting close to the heart of this campaign. But there's still a lot riding on how we finalize it, Margot nodded. And we need to address those rumors about a leak before we move further. People are still whispering in the hallways. He exhaled. I hate that it's become such a sideshow. The last thing we need is a suspicion that either of us is feeding Delmont and Creed. Margot's jaw tightened. Should we talk to Caldwell directly? Ask for an internal review or something to clear our names. Paul considered it. It might be risky, but letting suspicions fester is worse. Let's schedule a meeting with him and HR. Figure out how to squash this rumor. Soon after, they stood outside Caldwell's office door, waiting for permission to enter. The CEO was on a phone call, voice muffled. When he finally beckoned them in, he seemed slightly annoyed by the interruption. We need a few minutes of your time, Margot said calmly. There's a rumor spreading that one of us might be responsible for leaking ideas to Delmont and Creed. Caldwell's eyebrows rose. I've heard the chatter. Have you seen concrete evidence? Paul shook his head. No, we want to request an internal review or an IT security check to prove neither of us is involved. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, lips pursed in thought. That would be a drain on resources. But it might be necessary if employees are losing trust. Margot's voice was resolute. We can't lead this campaign while half the staff suspects us of sabotage. We need to clear the air. After a tense moment, Caldwell nodded. All right, I'll authorize a discreet security review. In the meantime, keep your focus on the campaign. If we come up empty-handed, that should end the rumor once and for all. They left his office with a sense of cautious relief. The wheels were in motion to address the gossip, though there was no guarantee it would dispel every doubt. Still, it was a step toward restoring credibility. That night, Paul met Vanessa for dinner at a cozy Italian bistro. Over bowls of pasta, he recounted the progress and the steps being taken to handle the leak rumors. She listened intently, occasionally reaching for his hand. I'm proud of you for facing this head-on, she said softly. I know how stressful it's been. He squeezed her hand in return, feeling a renewed appreciation for her unwavering support. Thank you. It helps to know you understand. Once this campaign is settled, I promise I'll make it up to you. Vanessa offered a gentle smile. Just keep doing what you're doing, being honest and giving your all. As Paul returned to his apartment later, he felt both a surge of determination and a twinge of dread. The biggest obstacle was still on the horizon, pitching the final product to the board, outshining the competitor, and proving that he and Margot could steer the company to victory. Their recent breakthroughs had propelled them closer to the heart of the storm, and he could sense the moment of truth drawing near. Paul hurried down the polished corridor of Hawthorne and Pierce with an uneasy knot in his stomach. Everyone on the marketing and creative teams was converging in the main conference room for the pivotal internal review, an event Andrew Caldwell had scheduled to determine whether their documentary-style campaign was ready for the board. Rumor had it, Caldwell also intended to address the lingering suspicions of a leak. Paul felt tension gather in his shoulders as he thought about the countless hours spent polishing every detail. When he entered, the large oval table was already crowded. Margot sat near the front, an open laptop before her, scrolling through last-minute adjustments to the video segments. Sarah Collins and Jessica Martin sat at her side, flipping through printed slides. Nathan leaned against a wall, arms folded, scanning the room with a watchful gaze. A murmur of voices filled the space, employees speculating on how Caldwell would react. Moments later, Caldwell stepped in with brisk authority, accompanied by a couple of IT representatives. The hush that fell was immediate. Paul could sense everyone bracing for impact. "All right, folks," Caldwell began, his tone clipped. "We're here to see if this campaign is truly board-ready. Before we do that, I have news on the rumored leak." A rustle of movement spread through the room as people exchanged glances. The IT reps set a folder on the table. Caldwell opened it, scanning its contents before continuing. "We conducted a thorough security review of emails, shared drives, and project logs. Our findings are clear. There is no evidence that any of you shared material with Delmont and Creed. That includes you, Paul, and you, Margot." Relief washed through Paul so powerfully that he had to resist letting out an audible exhale. He looked toward Margot, whose tense posture relaxed. A few employees murmured quiet apologies, while others sat in awkward silence. Caldwell's gaze swept the room. "I trust," Caldwell said firmly. "This settles any concerns about sabotage. Now let's move on to business." Margot rose, clicking a remote that displayed the final edits of their documentary-style footage. The video showcased Elizabeth Rowe's heartfelt testimony, interspersed with glimpses of smaller clients who had equally compelling stories. The camera angles, the warm color grading, the genuine emotion, it all coalesced into a powerful narrative that set Hawthorne and Pierce apart. As the footage ended, The conference room remained hushed for a moment before Caldwell switched off the projector. He tapped his pen against the table. "I won't lie, this is impressive. The question is whether it's enough to dethrone Delmont and Creed's campaign." Jessica spoke up, voice brimming with confidence. "We've already run a small consumer test, comparing teaser clips of our footage to Delmont and Creed's final ads. Ours scored higher in emotional impact and authenticity." Sarah added, "And the PR angle is strong. We'll position Hawthorne and Pierce as the home of genuine, human-centric marketing solutions." Caldwell set his pen down. "Very well. I want the board to see this tomorrow afternoon. Fine-tune whatever you can overnight. If it passes their scrutiny, we roll it out next week." A buzz of excitement and apprehension filled the air. Caldwell dismissed everyone, but a handful stayed behind. Paul joined Margot, Nathan and Sarah at the front of the room as Caldwell left. Nathan clapped Paul on the shoulder. "That was a huge step. Now all we have to do is dazzle the board." Sarah caught Margot's eye. "Think you can refine the opening sequence? Maybe highlight the brand name a bit sooner." Margot nodded. "Absolutely. Let's get Jessica on that. Shouldn't take long." Paul felt the wave of relief turning into a ripple of renewed anxiety. Tomorrow was crucial. If they failed to convince the board, all their progress would vanish. And although the leak's suspicions had been cleared, he knew the emotional weight of the last few weeks wasn't something any of them could shrug off easily. That evening, Paul intended to head straight home and brief Vanessa on the good news, but Margot caught him by the elevators. Her expression was guarded, yet determined. "Paul, there's something we should talk about. I'm relieved our names are cleared, but it doesn't change the fact we've been walking on eggshells. I don't want to keep avoiding the deeper issues between us." He hesitated, the elevator doors sliding open with a soft ding. "You mean our past, the divorce?" "Everything left unsaid," she nodded. "Yes, maybe once this board presentation is done, we should sit down for a real conversation." His heart pounded, recalling the friction and unspoken pull between them. "I agree. We need closure, or clarity, or both." Margot offered a faint, grateful smile. "All right, after tomorrow, we'll find a moment." They stepped into the elevator together, side by side, neither speaking. The tension was there, but so was a flicker of mutual respect, born from the chaos they'd endured. As the doors closed, Paul couldn't help but wonder if he was on the edge of not just a professional triumph, but an emotional confrontation he'd spent the past year avoiding. Early the next morning, Paul arrived at the office long before the usual crowd. The city streets were still quiet in the pale dawn light. He made his way to the editing suite, eager to see the latest tweaks Jessica had implemented overnight. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his sleeplessness, but adrenaline kept him going. Jessica looked up from her workstation and yawned. "Didn't expect to see you so early. Just finished layering some new graphics over the opening footage." He moved closer, peering at the large monitor. The Hawthorne and Pierce logo glowed subtly amidst shots of Elizabeth Rowe's daily routines, answering calls, reviewing spreadsheets, brainstorming with her staff. It was polished yet authentic, precisely what they'd envisioned. "This is great," Paul murmured. "Thanks, Jessica. You've been a lifesaver." She cracked a weary grin. "Happy to help. I'll catch a quick nap in the break room before we present this to the board." By the time other colleagues arrived, Paul was already re-watching the clips, mentally rehearsing how to frame each talking point for the board. Nervous energy hummed through the corridors. Margot joined him shortly after 8, a coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand. "We should run through our presentation outline once more," she suggested. "The board members are notoriously tough, especially on new approaches." He nodded, pulling up the slides. They spent the next hour refining the flow of data and storytelling, ensuring every bullet point linked logically to the footage. Outside, a steady rain began to patter against the windows, matching the tension inside. Finally, the appointed hour arrived. The board members filed into the large presentation room, most wearing stern expressions. Caldwell, seated at the head of the table, gave Paul and Margot a curt nod to begin. Paul's stomach twisted, but he summoned his professional confidence as he stepped forward. He started by recounting the challenges they'd faced: tight deadlines, unexpected competitor overlap, and a pivot to a documentary style. Then Margot took over, highlighting how the campaign's authentic approach spoke to diverse client needs. Together, they introduced the video, dimming the lights as the footage played. The board members watched in silence, arms folded, expressions unreadable. When the screen faded to black, Paul flipped the lights back on. A tense pause followed. He glanced toward Margot, who bit her lip, waiting. Caldwell cleared his throat. "So, board members, I'd like your candid feedback." An older man with silver hair leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "It's compelling. Genuine. And I'll give you this. You found a way to stand out from Delmont and Creed by going deeper into the client stories." A woman in a crisp suit nodded in agreement. "The narrative approach is refreshing. I can see how it might resonate with a wide audience." Encouraged, Paul outlined the marketing strategy, online teasers, social media campaigns, and a potential TV spot featuring the highlight reel. Margot added details on how her creative team would keep content fresh. Each point earned small signs of approval: a nod, a thoughtful hum, a page of notes flipped. Still, not everyone was swayed. A younger board member questioned the budget, referencing the extra costs for filming. Another raised concerns about the time it took to pivot. Paul and Margot handled each challenge calmly, explaining how they'd minimized overhead, built synergy among teams, and maintained brand consistency. In the end, Caldwell turned to the room at large. "I believe we have a winning campaign here, but the decision is yours. Do we greenlight immediate production and launch?" One by one, the board members voiced approval. It wasn't unanimous. One or two remained cautious, but the majority ruled in favor. A wave of relief swept over Paul. He and Margot shared a look that carried both triumph and unspoken relief. The board made its exit, the sense of finality palpable. Caldwell lingered after most had gone. "Well done," he said bluntly. "You pulled it off. Now don't let me down on the execution." As he strode away, Paul's pulse thundered. They had secured the board's blessing. The tension coiled inside him needed release, but another weight pressed on his chest. Margot's hint the night before about having a serious talk. The professional victory only highlighted how much personal territory remained unresolved. In the hallway outside, Margot exhaled slowly, eyes gleaming with a mix of fatigue and satisfaction. "We did it." "We did," Paul replied. He noticed Sarah and Jessica approaching, all smiles. Nathan hovered behind them, already congratulating Margot. The group converged in a brief, subdued celebration, hugs, pats on the back, sighs of relief. Yet an undercurrent of unspoken truths buzzed in the air. Later, as the adrenaline wore off, Margot found Paul alone in an empty office. The murmur of employees bustling about barely penetrated their secluded space. "Tonight," she said softly, "after work, let's have that conversation we both know is overdue." Paul nodded, a rush of nerves returning. "I'll be there." She didn't specify a location, but the meaning was clear. Somewhere private, away from the prying eyes of co-workers. The campaign's success was officially on track. Now it was time to face the emotional wounds that had only partially healed, if at all. That evening, Paul found himself in a quiet corner booth at a small, dimly lit restaurant called Ashford's, an unassuming place known for its classic American dishes and low-key ambiance. He had arrived first, choosing a table near the back where they could talk without interruption. Flickering candles cast warm shadows on the dark wooden walls. He fiddled with the hem of his napkin, mind churning. The board's approval was a high point in his career, yet it brought him no relief from the anticipation of Margot's arrival. He felt a peculiar mix of anxiety and resolve. They had avoided this conversation for over a year. Now there was no turning back. Margot slipped into the booth a few minutes later, wearing a simple blouse and jeans, her hair loosely pinned up. She looked both drained and determined. Taking a seat opposite him, she set her purse aside, exhaling. "Hey!" He nodded, swallowing hard. "Hey!" A server approached, offering menus. They each ordered something light. Neither had much appetite. Once the server left, silence stretched. Paul searched for a starting point, but words tangled on his tongue. It was Margot who spoke first. "I want to thank you," she began, her voice steady, "for being civil, for leading with respect during this project. We've come a long way from the bitterness we felt before." Paul acknowledged her gratitude with a small nod. "It wasn't easy. I'm not proud of how our marriage ended. I threw myself into work, neglected everything else." She studied her hands, folded neatly on the table, "and I let resentment pile up until I couldn't bear it. I know I left abruptly. In my mind it was the only option, but maybe if I'd stayed and fought harder." He cut in, gently. "Margot, the blame isn't all yours. We both contributed to that breakdown. When you walked out, it forced me to take stock of my life. I realized how blind I'd been to your needs." A flicker of pain crossed her features. "We were too young, too driven. Maybe we forgot to nurture our relationship. And then it was too late." Paul's throat tightened. He reached for his water glass, taking a cautious sip before speaking again. "Do you ever regret leaving?" Her eyes glistened with a complicated mixture of sorrow and fondness. "Some days, yes. I question if we could have salvaged what we had. Other days, I'm sure it was the right move. It drove me to explore new opportunities, become more independent. I guess regret and acceptance coexist in me." He absorbed her words. The server returned with their plates, simple salads, but neither seemed eager to eat. Instead, they continued, hearts heavy with unspoken confessions. "Vanessa," Paul said, stumbling over her name. "I should tell you about her. She's been incredibly patient, but this situation has tested us. She sees I'm conflicted." Margot nodded, quietly. "I don't want to cause strife in your relationship. I'm not here to win you back, Paul. I'm here to face the past, to make peace so we can move forward, whatever that looks like." He felt a swirl of relief and disappointment at her words. Part of him wanted a clear sign, a confession that she still loved him. But he also recognized the maturity in her statement. They couldn't erase the pain with a single conversation. Even now, a year after their divorce, the wounds were tender. He managed a slight smile. "I appreciate your honesty. I love Vanessa, but I'd be lying if I said seeing you didn't stir up old feelings. I think it's mostly guilt, and maybe a touch of what might have been." Margot's gaze flickered downward. "I understand. A part of me still cares for you, but I can't pretend I'm the same person you married. This project showed me how we can collaborate, respect each other. I needed that closure." Paul swallowed the knot in his throat. Closure. That's exactly what I've been missing. For a moment, neither spoke. The hush felt oddly comforting, like a space they both needed to breathe in truth. Finally, they picked at their food, letting the conversation settle. Outside, night had fully descended, the restaurant's small windows revealing a stretch of lamplights. Margot cleared her throat. "So, where does this leave us?" He sighed. "I'm not entirely sure. But I'd like to keep things honest. No illusions about romantic reconciliation if that's not where we're headed. No hidden resentments. Just two people who once shared something important, now choosing a healthier path forward." She reached out tentatively, placing a hand over his for the briefest moment. Agreed. In that quiet booth, Paul sensed a profound shift, a turning point in how he viewed Margot, himself, and the relationship they once had. He felt lighter, though a twinge of sadness still clung to him. They had uncovered the emotional truths that lay buried, unveiling how much they had each grown. It was an inward transformation. He recognized he could value his past with Margot without discarding the future he was building with Vanessa. The weekend brought a lull to the frantic pace at Hawthorne and Pierce. With the board's approval secured, the team could focus on perfecting the final launch materials rather than defending their concept. Posters, social media posts, and behind-the-scenes teasers were queued up, awaiting the big reveal scheduled for early next week. Paul spent Saturday morning at his apartment, reviewing the latest cut of the main video. He had a rare moment of calm to absorb how far they'd come. From the near chaos of rumors and missed opportunities, they now had a cohesive product that felt distinctly theirs. Every shot of Elizabeth Rowe, every snippet of client interviews, it all told a story of growth and authenticity. His phone buzzed. It was Nathan. "Mind if I swing by?" Nathan asked, voice cheerful. "I got some notes from Sarah. Plus, I thought you might need a break." Paul agreed. Within half an hour, Nathan knocked at the door, balancing a box of donuts in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. He stepped inside, surveying Paul's tidy living area. "Someone's been cleaning." Nathan grinned. Paul shrugged. "Needed the distraction. This place was a mess after all those late nights." They settled around the small dining table, flipping through Sarah's notes. Paul poured 2 cups of coffee while Nathan helped himself to a donut, powdered sugar dusting the corners of his mouth. Nathan glanced up. "So, rumor has it you and Margot had some sort of sit-down. Everything okay?" Paul paused, considering how much to reveal. "We finally talked about the past, really talked. It was freeing. I think we're in a better place now." Nathan nodded. "Good. The tension was practically radiating off you two. Might be easier to finish this campaign strong without all that baggage." Paul sipped his coffee, gratitude blooming in his chest. He had a friend who genuinely cared about his well-being, not just deadlines and performance metrics. "Thanks for sticking by me, man. This campaign's tested every ounce of patience I have." They spent the next hour making small tweaks to the promotional schedule. As they neared the end, Nathan closed his notebook. "We're basically set. Monday morning, we send everything to PR. By Wednesday, the campaign should be live." Paul felt a flutter of anticipation. Hard to believe we're at the finish line. Remember how bleak it seemed when Delmont and Creed first launched their version? Nathan laughed. "Yeah, and look at us now. I'd say we did all right." Before leaving, Nathan shot Paul a thoughtful look. "How's Vanessa handling all this? I remember she was pretty anxious about your dealings with Margot." Paul's face grew somber. "She's been patient, but it took a toll. I've been so consumed with work. Last night, I tried to assure her that Margot and I aren't rekindling anything. Still, I need to show Vanessa she's important to me." Nathan patted his shoulder sympathetically. "Well, with the campaign wrapping up, you can focus on that. Don't wait too long, or resentment can build. Trust me." Once Nathan left, Paul lingered in the hush of his apartment. He realized that, in preparing for the campaign's launch, he also needed to prepare for how his personal life would look when the dust settled. He pondered how Margot's conversation had helped him let go of guilt. But now a different challenge lay ahead, proving to Vanessa he could truly be present in their relationship. On Sunday, he invited Vanessa to a lakeside promenade for an afternoon walk. The wind blew softly across Lake Michigan, the autumn sun casting gentle rays on the water. They strolled side by side, hands intertwined. Paul noticed how she tensed at first, as though uncertain of his mood, but relaxed when she saw he was attentive. He paused at a bench overlooking the water. "Vanessa, I know I've been distant, but the campaign is about to launch, and things are calmer with Margot now. I want us to focus on each other." She studied his face. "I've been worried about you, about us, but I also understand how important your work is. It's just, we haven't had much time to talk about the future." He swallowed, remembering how Margot once asked him about the future, and he'd brushed it aside with work excuses. He wouldn't repeat that mistake. "I'm ready to talk about it now, if you are." Vanessa's eyes glimmered with cautious hope. "I am. You've learned a lot from what happened before, haven't you?" He gently squeezed her hand, gazing out at the rippling water. "I have. I'm not the same person who let his marriage fall apart because he was chasing a promotion. I know balance matters, and I value you more than any project." She offered a quiet smile. "Then let's move forward together. After your campaign launch, maybe we can plan a short trip or something, just us." Paul's heart lightened. "I'd love that." As they resumed their walk, he felt a sense of readiness for what lay ahead. With the campaign nearly complete, he could focus on building a future that balanced ambition with genuine care. A final test awaited him at work, the official launch, but on a personal level, he was preparing for the resolution he had once feared was impossible. Monday dawned with an electric buzz in the air. Hawthorne and Pierce's offices hummed like a beehive, employees rushing between cubicles, last-minute presentations glowing on computer screens, and phones ringing almost non-stop. This was the day they would finalize all assets for the documentary-style campaign before rolling it out to clients, the press, and the wider public. Paul arrived early, determined to oversee each step meticulously. Margot was already there, sipping coffee at her desk, eyes focused on her monitor. When she noticed Paul, she gave a small, genuine smile. Nothing over the top, just an acknowledgement that they had reached a milestone together. "Morning," she said softly, setting down her mug. "Ready?" "More than ready," Paul replied, his own nerves humming beneath his calm exterior. A flurry of short meetings followed. Sarah Collins gathered the PR team, confirming the exact time of the press release. Jessica Martin made final color adjustments to the web banners. Nathan double-checked the timeline for launching each social media component. By mid-morning, everything lined up. The next hurdle appeared around noon, when Andrew Caldwell summoned Paul and Margot to his office. He motioned for them to sit, then tapped a few keys on his laptop. "We're about to go live. Once we hit that button, there's no turning back. Everyone from local startups to major corporations will see this within hours. Are you confident we've covered every angle?" Margot nodded firmly. "We've triple-checked. The documentary features are polished, the brand messaging is on point, and PR is ready for any inquiries. I believe we're set." Paul added, "We also have a contingency plan if any aspect needs quick revisions." "Delmont and Creed won't catch us off guard again," Caldwell arched an eyebrow. "Let's hope so, because if they do, it'll mean we weren't as prepared as we thought." Paul and Margot exchanged a look, determined not to let their hard work falter at this final stage. Caldwell turned back to the screen, clicked a confirmation, and declared, "It's live." With those words, an invisible wave of anticipation washed over the entire company. Every department halted momentarily, checking online feeds, reloading brand pages, confirming the newly launched content. Emails and social media posts began circulating among high-profile clients and potential new customers. Within an hour, reactions trickled in. Paul watched from a central monitoring dashboard as the campaign's official video spread across platforms. Positive comments popped up. people lauding the authenticity, praising Elizabeth Rowe's story, and remarking on how fresh and heartfelt the approach seemed, compared to Delmont and Creed's more generic ads. Sarah bustled in with a broad grin. "We've got local business blogs requesting interviews already. The mood on social media is great. Nothing but positive feedback so far." Nathan joined them, checking real-time analytics. Engagement metrics are climbing fast. "We're outperforming the competitors' numbers from their first day launch." Paul caught Margot's eye. She had a glimmer of triumph there, tempered by fatigue. This felt like the apex of everything they had poured their souls into for weeks. Then, like a final test of fate, Delmont and Creed unveiled another last-minute update to their campaign. Within minutes, employees noted the competitor had released new videos featuring a prominent influencer. A hush fell over the watchers at Hawthorne and Pierce. A low sense of dread flickered. Could this overshadow their victory? Paul's jaw tensed. Margot stepped closer to the screen, scanning Delmont and Creed's content. The influencer spoke in polished marketing language, praising their platform. Yet, it lacked the genuine behind-the-scenes feel that Hawthorne and Pierce had championed. Margot turned to Paul. "They're slick, but I don't think this touches our emotional core." He nodded, recalculating. "We still have the stronger human angle. Let's keep an eye on responses." The tension lingered for another hour, but slowly, data confirmed that Hawthorne and Pierce's new campaign held firm in the face of Delmont and Creed's attempts to steal the spotlight. Online forums praised the sincerity of Margot's creative vision and the thoroughness of Paul's marketing strategy. Soon enough, the company's internal communication channels lit up with celebratory messages. Employees congratulated one another, relieved they weren't succumbing to last-second sabotage. As the day wound down, Caldwell convened a brief gathering in the large conference room. Team members packed in, some perched on tables and windowsills. The air crackled with excitement. "Well done," Caldwell stated, raising a glass of sparkling cider someone had thoughtfully provided. "We faced adversity, and we've come out stronger. I'm proud of this team." Cheers and applause broke out. A tide of relief and pride washed through the crowd. Paul stood next to Margot, sharing in a private moment of satisfaction. Their gazes met, and he recognized that, yes, they had surmounted the seemingly impossible together. For all the bitterness in their history, they had proven they could work side by side to deliver a victory for Hawthorne and Pierce. After the applause died down, small pockets of colleagues formed, exchanging high fives, laughter, and stories about the wild journey behind them. Margot excused herself to chat with Jessica and Sarah about next steps. Paul drifted toward Nathan, who offered a congratulatory handshake. "You did it, man," Nathan said, voice steady. "You and Margot both. And now maybe you can take a breather." Paul's shoulders sagged in relief. "That's the plan," he replied. "Vanessa and I need a real vacation. You should take some time off too," Nathan chuckled. "We'll see how Caldwell feels about that." As the impromptu celebration continued, Paul felt a swirl of emotions. Triumph at overcoming the rival campaign, gratitude for the team's unity, and a surprising sense of closure about his own past. He looked across the room to find Margot speaking animatedly with co-workers, a sign of fresh beginnings for her too. Their final showdown had been fought, calmly, professionally, and with a quiet grace he never imagined possible. Though the tension of the last few weeks still lingered in the undercurrent, the overriding sentiment was clear. They had won not only a corporate battle, but also a personal one, laying the foundation for whatever came next in their intertwined stories. Paul left Hawthorne and Pierce late on a Thursday evening, his mind still buzzing from the triumph of the campaign's launch. The city lights of Chicago glimmered through his windshield, tiny orbs against the inky sky. Despite the tiredness clinging to every part of his body, he found himself oddly restless. The next morning, he decided to take a personal day, an impulse that surprised even him. He sent a quick email to Andrew Caldwell and the rest of the team, explaining he needed to handle some personal matters now that the heavy lifting for the campaign was done. It felt strange to momentarily step back after so many sleepless nights of work, but relief coursed through him as soon as he hit send. His first stop was the suburban home of his mother, Helen Winters. She was 70, an active retiree who spent her days gardening and volunteering at a local animal shelter. When Paul arrived, Helen greeted him at the door, surprise flickering across her features. "Well, this is unexpected," she said, ushering him inside. "You look exhausted, dear. I haven't seen you in weeks." Paul sank into the floral couch. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh coffee. A shelf of old family photos drew his eye, capturing a younger version of himself back in college, at his wedding with Margot, and more recent snapshots with Vanessa at a company mixer. He noticed how the pictures lined up in an almost chronological order, weaving the story of his life in a few frames. "I needed a break," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "The new campaign launched, and we survived some serious setbacks. I just wanted to visit before I bury myself in the next phase." Helen brought him a mug of tea. "I'm glad you're here. You haven't looked this worn out since you were juggling your master's program and full-time work." Her gaze turned gentle. "And maybe there's something else on your mind." Paul swallowed, feeling the weight of everything he had been through. "There's a lot. Work was intense, but then there's Margot. She and I managed a major campaign together. It went well, great actually, but it brought up old stuff, and I'm in a relationship with Vanessa, trying to reassure her everything's all right." Helen sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his. "You loved Margot deeply once. You can't just forget someone who was part of your life for so long." He nodded, staring at his tea. "We've sort of made peace, talked about what went wrong, apologized. That helped. But I can't shake this feeling that I'm at a crossroads." Helen studied him. "Crossroads can be blessings, Paul. They make you decide what your heart truly wants." He left a few hours later with a calmer mind, grateful for his mother's soothing presence. On the drive back to the city, the memory of his conversation with Margot in that quiet restaurant lingered. He felt as if a door had opened, letting long, stifled emotions float free. Part of him wished to step through that door and see if a second chance was possible. Another part stayed loyal to Vanessa, who had been a steady, supportive force in his life. That afternoon, Paul texted Vanessa, "Any chance you can get off work early today?" Her reply came quickly, "I can manage 4 p.m. What's up?" He suggested they meet at a small park near Lake Michigan, a place where tall oaks arched over winding paths. Children often played on the grassy fields, and retirees fed ducks by the water. Paul arrived first, leaning against a lamppost while watching a father help his toddler learn to walk. The simple scene tugged at him, reminding him how fleeting time could feel. When Vanessa appeared, her smile was reserved, concerned. He reached for her hand, guiding her toward a bench near a blooming flower bed. "I visited my mom," he said gently. "I needed time to reflect on everything that's happened, finishing the campaign, dealing with my history with Margot." Vanessa listened quietly. "You've been distant. I want to understand what you're thinking." He inhaled, feeling a tightness in his chest. "I'm trying to figure out where I stand emotionally. Margot and I had that long talk, and we're not looking to jump back into anything, but it changed how I view our past. I realize I never fully grieved the end of our marriage, never faced my own failings." Vanessa's expression was a mixture of empathy and apprehension. "Are you saying you want to go back to her?" He squeezed her hand. I'm saying I don't know what the future holds for me and Margot. My feelings are complicated, but I haven't made any decisions. My priority now is to be honest with you. You've been incredibly patient, and I don't want to string you along." She swallowed hard, shoulders tensing. "I appreciate that, but it's still painful. I care about you and want you to be happy, even if that means it's not with me." Paul reached up to brush a stray hair from her face. "Let's not jump to conclusions. I'm committed to sorting my heart out, and I do care about you so much. I just need a little time to be certain of what I'm doing." As a breeze rustled the trees above, they shared a quiet moment, gazes locked in mutual uncertainty. The world around them carried on, children laughing, runners passing by, a squirrel darting across the grass. Yet for Paul and Vanessa, everything felt suspended in a delicate, tenuous balance. He realized that confronting his own vulnerability was part of returning to the ordinary world after the campaign's storm, but nothing would be truly ordinary again. Not after all he had learned. Monday morning arrived, and Paul stepped into Hawthorne and Pierce with a different perspective. The campaign was live, feedback continued rolling in, and the company hummed with post-launch momentum. Yet what struck him was how the corridors seemed a little brighter, colleagues friendlier. Now that tensions had eased, casual banter and genuine smiles replaced the guarded looks of the preceding weeks. Andrew Caldwell, less grim than usual, stopped Paul by the coffee station. "Heard you took some personal time on Friday?" Caldwell noted, adjusting his crisp tie. "Well deserved. The board is quite pleased with the numbers so far." Paul forced a small grin. "Thanks. I appreciate you understanding." Caldwell nodded in an uncharacteristically amiable way. "Just don't let success make us complacent. There's talk of new opportunities we might seize soon." The conversation ended on that ambiguous note, leaving Paul wondering how quickly Caldwell expected them to move on to the next big thing. In the creative department, Margot was discussing expansion ideas for the campaign with Jessica Martin. Jessica caught sight of Paul first and gave him a broad smile. "Hey, Paul, we were just brainstorming ways to extend the documentary concept. Maybe short webisodes featuring everyday employees." Margot turned, meeting Paul's gaze. Her expression softened. "We want to keep the authenticity vibe going, instead of letting it fizzle." He nodded, stepping closer. "It's a good idea. People seem genuinely interested in how our clients use our tools in real life. But let's not overload the audience with too much too soon. We need to maintain quality over quantity." The three of them hashed out preliminary ideas, scribbling notes on a whiteboard. Sarah soon joined, chiming in about PR angles. As the discussion flowed, Paul noticed a comfortable, almost familial energy in the room. It reminded him of how a team could feel when united by both adversity and triumph. Afterward, Paul lingered by Margot's desk. Jessica and Sarah had stepped away, leaving them alone in the row of cubicles. Margot stretched her arms, a look of content fatigue on her face. "So," she said quietly, "how was your weekend?" He shrugged, mind drifting to his conversation with Vanessa. "I spent time with my mom, tried to sort through some personal stuff." Margot studied him with understanding. "I had dinner with an old friend from my freelancing days. It was good to talk about how much my life has changed since I started here." He mustered a half smile. "It has changed. I never thought we'd end up working side by side, successfully too." A subtle laugh escaped her. "Me neither, but it feels less tumultuous now." They exchanged a brief, meaningful look, heavy with the knowledge of everything they'd overcome. Before either could say more, an intern approached with a stack of documents for Margot, effectively dispersing the moment. During lunch break, Paul found himself at a nearby cafe where he'd arranged to meet Nathan. They sat at a corner table with sandwiches and iced tea, discussing the after effects of the campaign launch. I'm already hearing rumors about possible expansions to Europe, Nathan said, leaning in. Caldwell wants to ride this wave of positive attention. Paul set down his sandwich, eyebrows arched. That'd be huge, but it means more travel, more hours. Nathan laughed wryly. Sure does. You up for it? Paul thought about it, an unusual hesitance knotting in his gut. I might be, but I also promised Vanessa and myself that I'd aim for balance. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. It's easy to get swept up again. Don't lose sight of your personal life, especially after everything with Margot. Paul appreciated the advice. I won't. I'm learning. When he returned to the office, he bumped into Vanessa in the lobby. Her accounting firm had offices in the same building, though on a different floor. She carried a stack of folders, looking tired but smiled politely at him. Hey, she greeted, shifting the folders to her other arm. He leaned in for a quick, tentative kiss on her cheek. Didn't expect to see you here. A busy day? She nodded. Swamped. Just ran a few errands. How's your day going? He described the morning's meeting, how the vibe at Hawthorne and Pierce felt more optimistic. She listened, nodding, though he sensed a lingering tension in her posture. You want to grab dinner later? He offered, hoping to reconnect. She hesitated before agreeing. That'd be nice. Text me the details, okay? Paul watched her hurry off to the elevators, feeling the unspoken weight still between them. He reminded himself that changes in his ordinary world wouldn't magically fix everything overnight. Yes, the campaign's success had eased professional tension, but in its wake, he still carried the puzzle pieces of a personal life needing careful reassembly. As the workday wrapped up, he found Margot speaking to a junior designer about the next phase of mini-documentaries. She spotted Paul, offering him a polite nod. There was warmth there, but also caution, as though both recognized that returning to life as it once was simply wasn't possible. Their world had changed, both as professionals and as people who had confronted their past regrets. Now, each step required a delicate dance between old feelings and newfound clarity. Hawthorne and Pierce organized a small celebratory mixer for the creative and marketing teams 1 week after the official launch. A hush of excitement and light-hearted chatter filled the newly renovated lounge on the building's top floor. Festooned with minimalist decor and a stunning skyline view, the space provided a perfect backdrop for a more relaxed gathering. Paul arrived to find colleagues perched on stylish stools and modern couches, sipping drinks while gazing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He spotted Jessica engaged in a lively conversation with a designer from another department, and Sarah laughing with a group near the makeshift bar. Margot stood at the window, arms folded, taking in the city lights. Before he could greet her, a new intern named Shelby approached him. Shelby was in her 20s, bright-eyed, wearing an earnest smile. "Paul," she said, fiddling nervously with the hem of her blouse, "could I ask you something? I'm about to pitch my first set of ideas to Margot's team, but I'm terrified I'll mess up." He offered a reassuring chuckle. "Take a breath, Shelby. You've been helping with the post-launch analytics, right?" She nodded vigorously. "Yes, but I've never presented in front of higher-ups before." Paul glanced around the room, noticing Margot stepping away from the window and chatting with a copywriter. Margot might be the creative director, but she's approachable. Give her your best work. She appreciates sincerity and clear thinking. Shelby exhaled, looking somewhat relieved. "You make it sound easy." He leaned in conspiratorially. "It's not always easy, but fear is normal. I've learned you can either let it hold you back or use it to stay sharp. Preparation helps. Confidence grows with time." Shelby thanked him, retreating to a corner where she could rehearse her pitch in her head. Paul felt a surge of empathy. He remembered a time when he was that young and eager, just starting out. But the lessons he'd gathered since then were far more personal. the price of overworking, the importance of genuine communication, and the sting of letting relationships crumble under the weight of ambition. Nearby, Margot caught his eye and gave a subtle wave. He walked over, noting how she seemed at ease in her role, respected, confident, but no longer distant. "Quite a view," she remarked, glancing at the shimmering lake and skyline below. He nodded. "It's nice to celebrate up here after everything." A brief silence fell. Then she cleared her throat. "How are you doing, really?" He considered her question. "I'm in flux, but a good kind, I think. I've been trying to be honest with Vanessa about how I feel. She deserves clarity." Margot looked out the window, nodding thoughtfully. "And you?" she asked. "Are you finding clarity for yourself?" He let out a soft sigh. "I'm working on it. I spoke to my mom, spent time reflecting on us, on what happened. I'm seeing how important it is to learn from those mistakes." She set her drink on a nearby table, turning to face him fully. "You know, I used to blame you for everything. Then I blamed myself. Now I see we both contributed. We both had our flaws and overlooked the signs." He swallowed the lump forming in his throat. "I wish I'd realized that sooner. But maybe we needed the distance to see it." Across the room, Sarah raised her glass, drawing the crowd's attention. She proposed a toast to the creative and marketing teams for pulling off what many had deemed impossible. Glasses clinked, cheers erupted, and the group drank to shared success. Paul saw the bright smiles, felt the camaraderie in the air, and recognized that they'd forged not just a campaign, but a resilient network of support. After the toast, Margot excused herself to speak to an associate, leaving Paul momentarily alone. He found a seat by one of the tall windows, gazing at the city. The reflection of the room behind him overlapped with the vast expanse of lights outside. He thought of the fresh interns like Shelby, the seasoned veterans like Caldwell, and everyone in between. All of them had something to learn and something to teach. Nathan, ever the observant friend, appeared at his side. "A penny for your thoughts," he teased, sipping from his glass. Paul half smiled, "Just taking in how far we've come. It feels good, you know." Nathan nodded, placing a hand on Paul's shoulder. "I do know. Let's not forget the lessons. Hard-won wisdom shouldn't go to waste." Paul watched the reflection of Margot conversing across the room, Jessica and Sarah laughing near the bar, and the city's shimmering high-rises beyond. He felt the weight of his experiences settling into something akin to acceptance. This mixture of personal and professional revelations was shaping him into a version of himself who knew the cost of ambition and the value of genuine connection. He wondered if he could guide people like Shelby so they wouldn't have to learn every lesson the hard way. As the celebration continued, Paul realized that while the pain of the past wouldn't vanish completely, it no longer controlled him. He sensed a quiet readiness, a willingness to move forward, carrying the insights he had gained and preparing to share them with anyone who might benefit. Several days later, as the buzz from the campaign's success began to settle, Paul stood outside Hawthorne and Pierce in the early evening chill. He had wrapped up an intensive follow-up meeting with Caldwell and a few department leads about the campaign's next phase. Most employees had already gone home, leaving only a few lights glowing through the glass facade. He checked his phone and saw a message from Vanessa. "We need to talk at your place tonight." A tension coiled in his stomach. Her words, though polite, carried a finality he couldn't ignore. He texted back, "Yes, of course. I'll be there soon." On the drive home, he fought the urge to overthink. Something about the simplicity of her request hinted that she, too, had been doing her own soul-searching. He pulled into his building's parking garage, walked to his apartment, and found Vanessa waiting by the door. She offered a subdued smile, stepping inside as he unlocked the entrance. They settled on the living room couch, the same spot where they'd once shared laughter and wine while discussing future vacations. Tonight, though, the mood felt somber. She folded her hands on her lap, inhaling deeply before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, voice steady but tinged with sadness, "about us, about your history with Margot, and about where we stand." Paul nodded, bracing himself. "I understand. I want you to know I'm not stringing you along. I just needed time to figure out my own heart." She raised her gaze, eyes misty. "I know, but I also see how conflicted you've been. You care about me, but there's a part of you that never really stopped loving Margot, or at least never fully let go." His chest tightened. "I'm not sure it's love in the same sense anymore," he whispered. "We've changed, but she was, still is, a big part of my life." "It's been confusing." Vanessa's lips trembled. "I love you enough to let you go if that's what you need." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "But I also can't stand in the way of whatever you two might rediscover. It's killing me to see you torn." Silence wrapped around them, dense and suffocating. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, hating that he'd brought them both to this precipice. Vanessa had been supportive, loyal, and nurturing. He genuinely cared for her, but something within him remained unsettled whenever he considered a future without fully reconciling his feelings for Margot. He reached for her hand gently. "I never wanted to hurt you. You don't deserve this turmoil." She blinked away tears. "I know you didn't plan this, but life happens. If we keep forcing something that isn't whole, we'll both resent each other eventually." Paul's voice came as a rasp. Are we ending this?" She looked away, struggling with the weight of her own words. "I think we might be, because if you can't give me your whole heart, then I'd rather step aside. I deserve to be with someone who's sure about me. And you—" She hesitated, meeting his gaze. "You deserve clarity." A raw ache surged through him, accompanied by an unexpected sense of relief. He recognized the truth in her words, even as they stung. She leaned in and they embraced, quiet tears falling between them. It wasn't angry or bitter, just heartbreakingly sad. Within the hour, she gathered her things. They shared a final, tender goodbye at the doorway. He promised her the respect and space she needed, and she wished him the peace of mind he had yet to find. When the door closed behind her, he slumped against it, breathing raggedly, his mind racing through a cascade of memories, laughing in bed on lazy Sundays, quiet dinners, and the unwavering support she'd offered during the campaign meltdown. He spent the next few days wrestling with solitude. He went through the motions at work, coordinating the final touches on the extended mini-documentaries, addressing follow-up emails from clients praising the campaign, yet the emptiness weighed on him. People around the office noticed a change in him, though few dared ask about it. Margot occasionally observed him from a distance, sensing something was off. One evening, after a late strategy session, Paul found Margot waiting by his office door, arms folded, expression concerned. "You look like you haven't slept in days." He paused, exhaling. "I've been going through a rough patch. Vanessa and I ended things." Her features tightened with empathy. "I'm sorry. I know that must hurt." Paul met her gaze, feeling raw but honest. "I don't know if I made the right choice, or if it just happened that way, but I owe you the truth. A part of me still wonders about us." Margot's breath caught, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "I'm not sure what that means yet." He nodded. "Me neither, but maybe we can figure it out slowly, if that's what we both want." For a moment, they stood in silence, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. He sensed the faintest warmth, a gentle promise that the future remained unwritten and that their story might continue in a different form. Though his heart still ached from letting go of Vanessa, he felt a new openness guiding him forward, like a dimly lit path showing just enough light to take the next step. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.